Hello, I'm here to bother you about DRDT. FNAF? What's that? Hyperfixation switch? No, DRDT is all I know. Danganronpa The Spare Time is a fan series created based on the games of the same name, Danganronpa, and I absolutely recommend you watch it, especially before this video since obviously there will be spoilers. It's a highly emotional murder mystery centered around a killing game, and for the people who were here for FNAF, if you enjoy FNAF theorizing, you are going to love the mystery surrounding it. There is a lot of theorizing around the lore which actually makes sense, unlike you know what. It's made for ages 16 and up, so I don't know how many of you that eliminates, but if you're one of the people who really enjoyed and even cried during that scene of ruin, then you are going to get emotionally destroyed by this thing. Anyways, with my previous audience successfully alienated, let's actually talk about the MB now. It's centered around David and his recent heel turn as of Chapter 2, Episode 11. It serves as a window into David's mind, set to the song Literature Girl Insane by, I am not pronouncing that, it's a miracle I can even know how to pronounce Grebenshikova. As you'll see, it's a pretty cynical and almost sarcastic song with tons of literary references, which is a very important part of the music video. There is a lot to talk about here, from footnotes to numerals to colors and language and even secret codes, which, don't worry, I will help you solve, but that's gonna have to wait until the end of the video. For now, let's not dilly-dally too much and jump straight into it, except first I have to make some clarifications. See, there's a lot of ways to read every scene in this MB, so there's a few concepts I need to explain before we actually get to analyzing it. For one, the footnotes, which show up repeatedly throughout the video and are referenced in the description. Basically, when you see a small number show up, you reference the description to see what it has to say about whatever phrase or image is attached to. The Roman numerals are related to a crossword puzzle I'll talk about when it shows up in the video. And then there's actually two theories which are pretty important to talk about since they change the way you perceive a lot of the video. First is color theory by Tumblr user Azrax. It says that the colored lyrics throughout the MB are actually each related to one character based on the color of the lyric. So, for example, the phrase rolling with laughter and turning into clowns as it's pink is related to wit. It's worth noting that while the original Literature Girl Insane video has colored lyrics as well, they're not colored in the same way, which means that the colored lyrics in the David MB are colored with a purpose. Here's a chart showing all the colors and their respective characters, though you may notice there's a few oddities here. For one, there's a few colors which could be two characters. You see green and mint there are either Teruko or Who. Green is a pretty important color, it's one of the ones that shows up the most, a total of 13 times in fact, an unlucky number that will suggest it's Teruko's. And mint only has 2 words, which seems odd for the protagonist of the whole series and David's character foil. However, Who is important for David specifically, so it wouldn't be impossible for her to get one of the more prominent colors. And in fact, there's a specific line which actually really makes me think green is supposed to be Who. We'll get to it when we get to it. Then you can see that orange is for either Xander or Ace. Giving orange to Xander seems weird, but in the demo, where Xander shows up in a class trial, unlike in the actual series, you can see that the first letter of his name is colored orange, so it wouldn't be impossible. And orange does show up in some pretty suspicious places, which make me think it's supposed to be Xander. However, there is an argument for Ace, as orange is weirdly underrepresented for a character in the supposed main cast. But that's sort of fixed by red, which as you can see is a bit of a clusterfuck. Red is by far the most overrepresented color in the MB, showing up like double the amount of times of any other color. And because it shows up so many times, it's impossible to assign it to one character without running into issues. There are lines that only work with Mai, lines that only work with Veronica, and lines that sort of only work with Xander. So I'll be taking one more FF creator's interpretation on this, that red is intentionally ambiguous and any given red line can belong to any of these 3 characters, or even multiple. It's odd, but I think it makes sense. With Xander being main cast, he will be able to bend a few of the rules, like David does, having 2 colors, one for his cheery persona and one for his more evil persona, which is likely a lie, but you know. Then Mai is mysterious enough that this sort of ambiguity does fit her, And Veronica weirdly has precedent of showing up in extremely random places just to confuse things. We'll get to it when we get to it. Finally, Shay and Neri fight over some blues, which have so few lines that it's hard to tell which is which, and Arturo gets a question mark because he has one word which doesn't really seem related to him. I'm just giving it to him because he's the one of the characters who's left that isn't assigned a color, but it sort of fits the color scheme of that word. It's really weird. What's his deal? It's important to note color theory only extends to lyrics, officially anyways. There is color-coded background text, but the theory doesn't work too great with it. A lot of the text just doesn't really fit the characters, and so much of it is so translucent that it's hard to tell which character it actually belongs to. So I'll still make a note of saying which color is the text and what character it will be assigned to, but take it with a grain of salt, it probably isn't color-coded. And then the second theory, which is important for understanding, is language theory, brought up by Anderson on Tumblr. Really, the RDT Tumblr is where I get a lot of these theories. It's related to footnote 5, which states as the translation has been intentionally botched in many parts, it should not be considered accurate. And this is actually objectively true. For example, in the phrases "right now, why do you cry?" and "right now, why do you go insane?", the original lyrics more accurately translate to "why do I cry?" and "why do I go insane?". This is especially notable because the dev does seem well acquainted with Japanese. Some of the lines actually appear in the order of the Japanese words rather than the order that will make sense with English sentence structure. For example, the line "look, aside from that, give me the usual medicine" actually shows up in the order "look, aside from that, the usual medicine give me". That makes no sense in English, of course, but it does fit the Japanese sentence structure. Thus, this implies that any lines which were intentionally mistranslated were mistranslated for a reason. We'll get to it when we get to it, but just for now, keep that in mind. And now we can finally start playing the MB right after we talk about footnote 8. Yeah, there's more preamble. See, footnote 8 is the only footnote of the bunch that no one's actually found to my knowledge. Which is wild considering how many people have tried. And that means it may not actually be in the video at all. Take note of what it says. "Toot toot, child," said the Duchess. "Everything's got a moral if only you can find it." This is a quote from Alice in Wonderland, which you'd think will suggest it appears next to a passage from Alice in Wonderland. It doesn't, but what it means is quite important. There is a lesson to be learned from everything, as long as you can find it. And, well, we can't find it, which will suggest there is nothing to be learned from this video, or at least nothing important. Obviously we know that's not true, but think about it from David's perspective. As you're gonna see, he's very cynical and doesn't believe the world can change, etc, etc, so it will make sense for him to say that, well, there's nothing of importance to be gained here. It's just the ramblings of someone who is not even human. It's pointless. It's all pointless. You get it? It kinda works, and well, since we can't find the footnote, we might as well go with what we have, I guess. Alright, let's actually start playing the video now. It starts with a simple warning that there will be spoilers for the RDT and asking us to forgive the creator for it. And don't worry, I do.
僕も君もあいつもこいつもどいつもただのバカだからときめきも
And what a start! It already establishes the playful yet mean-spirited personality of the person singing the song, which in this case will be David. Now, many people, including myself, think that the persona David is putting on at the end of episode 11 is actually just an act and he isn't actually that mean. It's more of an exaggeration of his worst traits, such as his cynicism and his belief that no one can change. But still, that is kind of the personality he's putting on at the moment, and so it fits with what the song is showing us. Apart from that, we just have a feast of color theory with this one. White lyrics are usually associated vaguely with David, so I make sense there. You in Black shows up quite a few times during the video, 3 times to be exact, and it's one of the reasons we relate this color to Mai, because everyone seems obsessed with her, so you makes sort of sense. More sense than any other character anyways. That guy in orange combined with this guy in green is the lyric that makes me think that Xander gets orange instead of Ace, because this guy is either Teruko or Hu, two people who are very important for David, and so having Ace be thrown among Mai and Teruko / Hu it's sorta weird, which is why I think that's Xander. Are all just idiots' final verdict is red, and so we have to assign it to one of the three. I believe this is Xander, since David seems to have a somewhat love-hate relationship for him, in kinda like a tsundere way. There's a scene later in the video which makes this abundantly clear, so for now just trust me on this. Anonymous hopes in pink for wit, I guess he's kind of a hopeful character. Game in yellow for the cheery David, who is about to show up, so I think that makes sense. We are playing his game in a way by watching this MV. Goodbye Triangle Square is a reference to the nursery rhyme Goodbye Triangle, see you again Square. I don't know what that is, but alright. You'll notice a twist to the lyrics where the singer says goodbye to the triangle, but doesn't promise the square to return. If you feel like reading into it, it could be trying to convey bye to both of you, see you never, which sorta fits the general vibe of the song. I guess we can go with that. This twist is from the original LCI, so nothing David specific here, and I'm starting to realize that I'm going to have to both analyze Literature Girl Insane and the MV all at once. Oh god, this is going to take forever. And then buy in red, buy in yellow, and buy in green. Buy in red probably for Xander, who is dead, and maybe also Mai if she is dead too. Buy in yellow is for Cheery David, who I guess you could say has gone away with the reveal of his real personality. And buy in green for either Teruko or Hu, because sure, why not. And here we start seeing the insanity come in. I'm not going to read all the background text word for word, otherwise we'd be here forever, but I will address all the portions. The top part is the beginning of Flowers of Buffoonery by Osamu Dazai, a book with a self-aware narrator in the form of the protagonist, who constantly talks to the audience about the flaws of his novel. It kicks off with Welcome to Sadness Population 1, before going on to lament on how all the protagonist's friends have left them, as they pray for the death by a suicide pact of Sona, their lover, while also praying for their own survival. Something like that. The main takeaway here is that David's sad and everyone's turned against him, though it could also be used as evidence for the idea that David genuinely thinks he drove Ari to suicide, and is putting on an act to convince himself he truly is irredeemable and deserves death. In a more general sense, the protagonist of Flowers of Buffoonery, who is also the protagonist of a book mentioned later, No Longer Human, is someone who lives in constant shame as they do not consider themselves truly human, but builds a persona to interact with others, which fits very closely with what we know of David. This is why I sometimes reference David not feeling human. Then the yellow quote, which will be related with pre-episode 11 David if color theory extended to backgrounds, is a passage from Murder on Orient Express by Agatha Christie. The quote claims that if you confront a liar with the truth, they'll usually admit it from surprise, so you only need to guess right to find the truth. This relates to Ace confronting David with the truth in the second-class trial. The CN text, which will be related to Mono TV if color theory applied, is a passage from Dogra Magra by Kyusaku Yumeno, a book which, when I Google, I only find Bungo Stray Dogs. Thank you, Google. Anyways, the book is about an amnesiac who apparently murdered his own family but doesn't remember it after an experiment. The passage is the main character breaking down as they realize they don't even remember their own name, trying to convince himself it's alright when it clearly isn't. He laments not knowing his own nature as he doesn't know if he quote, fell from heaven or rose from the earth. I believe, applied to David, this could mean he's put on an act for so long, he doesn't know what the real David even is anymore. Then, fuck you is self-explanatory and will probably be related to Xander if color theory was different. Again, love-hate, wait for the explanation. And finally, the Windings, which translates to quite a meaningful message. We're no strangers to love. Yeah, it's a rickroll, all of it, it's just a rickroll. Okay, the top text is clever because it's actually completed by the lyrics. The full phrase is an archaic personal pronoun rarely used in real life but popularized in fiction by the book I Am a Cat. a book told from the perspective of a cat and written by Natsume Soseki. The pronoun it's talking about is wagahai, which literally translates to I, as shown by the book being originally named Wagahai wa Neko de Aru, but it's actually a bit more nuanced. It's apparently a more arrogant way of saying I, more like someone of my class. This arrogance is reflected in the green text to the side, a passage from I Am a Cat, which speaks of the arrogant audacity humans carry themselves with because of their superior strength. But there's one more thing. Nowadays, wagahai is actually used only by fictional anthropomorphic animals, like Morgana for Persona 5 and fucking Bowser from Mario. So props to LHI, this is actually a really clever way to show the inherent contradiction in the mindset of the song's protagonist, and by extension David. See, David hates himself, to the point he doesn't consider himself human, that's where the animal part of wagahai comes in. But he's also extremely arrogant, in the sense he feels he understands the world better than others. Where most people will insist others can change and better themselves, David sees them all for the horrible, irredeemable people they are. He is above humans in a way. That's why Cat is colored yellow for his Chiru persona. He is the cat, arrogantly referring to himself with wagahai, which I really hope I'm pronouncing right because I've said it a lot. You'll also notice Cat gets written over by dog in cyan, which is interesting because the song never actually says dog. This is the line which assigns monotypy to the color cyan, based on its introduction. It gets called a cat and corrects the cast by insisting it's a dog. What is said is I am whatever, or my name is whatever, with the latter word in red. I'll assign this to Veronica, who is the only one of the red trio David will feel whatever about, as he doesn't have strong feelings towards her, yet. So, I am whatever, I don't know is what you're told, with the last part in David's yellow. Interestingly, it's one of the sections which may be intentionally mistranslated from my research, with the original perhaps reading something closer to I didn't know that, I get told. Vale. This type of pronoun switching is pretty common in language theory. I'm not sure what this will mean, but I think it's that David tells the others he doesn't have a good grasp of his identity, he's still figuring himself out, but that's what he tells them. Since the lyric is color-coded to David's inspirational persona, it's probably a lie. He does know what he is, but others won't like the answer, because he sees himself as a monster. Maybe it's up for debate, really. The next part is written in the Japanese word order, as you've probably noticed, but it goes something like, only fools like a heart full of ambition, even if you have it, you're called an idiot. Ambition is yellow, possibly because David gives inspirational speeches, so he drives people to their ambitions. But it could also be seen as him wishing he could be more like the personality he pretends to have, and that he could feel the things he pretends he feels. His inspirational persona is his ambition. Heart is pink for wit because, to quote Monotypy, he has too many hearts on him. Matchmaker hearts, you get the idea. Your golden is soft blue for Ari according to Azerox and Shay according to me. Ari works because it will be a reference to name calling like bullying, and Shay works because it could be connected back to her family and her mother. You're called a Rosales. Idiot for either Teruko or Who because David thinks they're both idiots. And after all is Evil's David persona because, I don't know, it's sorta pessimistic when read in full context, like there's no winning here. Either you're a fool without ambition or you're an idiot for thinking you can achieve anything. Remember, these are David thoughts, not mine, but surely you have enough media literacy to understand that. Next. The life full of much shame line comes from No Longer Human, where the protagonist laments on how separated they feel from the way actual human beings feel, to the point where he can't even imagine living as a human. He gives the example of thinking that a bridge was for decoration instead of moving about. The book is also referenced in the bibliography later, again driving home the point that David doesn't understand the rest of humanity. But didn't I say he believed he understood the world better than others? Yes, but there's nuance. David believes he understands the world better because he understands the way humans act. He's a manipulator, he understands that people will not change and he knows what to do to get people to do the things he wants them to. But he doesn't get why they do it. The underlying feelings which drive them he cannot comprehend. Thus, he considers himself no longer human. In other news, Life of Much Shame is green, either referencing Teruko's bad luck or who's past if she has the hopeless child secret. A really good theory I will not get into now. The falling slanted sun is meant to be from The Setting Sun by our good friend Osamu Dazai, though I don't think the phrase falling slanted sun is actually used, but whatever. The phrase is talking about a revolution against the old morality, an old morality which conflicts with the falling slanted sun, which represents the Japanese society after World War II. Isn't this set in the US? It claims the revolution needs more victims, since the most beautiful thing someone can be is a victim. Wait, what? This one's hard to understand. The color-coded part is actually the easiest part. David's speaker persona is like the setting sun because it's going away, breaking down. What I don't get are the references to revolution and victims. Unless, okay, if David is the setting sun, he's in conflict with the old morality, sure, he hates everyone, that would include the old morality, I guess. And when it says, please try to continue to fight your struggle, it's talking to Xander, maybe? Despite having, no indication of it? Frankly, this one's confusing, but that's the best I got. Then, rolling with laughter and turning into clowns is for wit, because he's a jokester. But the bottom part is interesting. It's from, guess where, Flowers of Buffoonery, a book which, as far as I can tell, doesn't actually include the phrase rolling with laughter and turning into clowns, but I digress. It reads, I play the role of the fool, doomed to chase them down forever. While it doesn't make much sense without context, with context it paints an interesting picture. It's talking about the consequence of the protagonist's works, he's an author, its meaning. So he plays the role of the fool, doomed to chase down the meaning forever, as he tries to figure out what motivates him to write in the first place. Extrapolated to David, that will mean he doesn't find meaning in his speeches, but he gives them anyways, doomed to always look for a consequence of them, a point. And perhaps the context is left out to explain the other thing, remember the revolution? By wanting to stick by Xander, he's doomed to always chase the meaning in revolutions he doesn't understand, because he doesn't think the world can change. Maybe I'm grasping at straws to understand the other thing, so... Finally, we have a simple bibliography with the books of Dazai we've discussed. No Longer Human is cyan for Mono TV because, well, it's not human, and Goodbye is probably for Xander, who is dead, and or maybe for Mai, who is maybe dead. You may not expect it, but this is one of the most complex scenes in the entire MV. First, you have a seemingly contradictory if you escape from the tunnel it'd be a disastrous scene, so go escape. You may think escape refers to the killing game, but that will make no sense with the original LGI, so there's gotta be something else. Now, to understand what's going on, we have to understand what escaping the tunnel represents. The background text in that scene, seemingly in grey or just white, is the opening to Snow Country by Yasunari Kawabata, and it's worth noting that as far as I can tell this isn't in the original LGI video. This book opens with a train exiting a tunnel and the protagonist falling in love with someone who they cannot be with due to differences in classes. So, could escaping the tunnel be a metaphor for opening yourself up to love others? The connection between escaping the tunnel and love, either platonic or romantic, is reiterated by the quote from Hamlet attached to the so right after. I did love you once, you should not have believed me. In that scene, Hamlet tells Ophelia she should not have trusted him, either because he's untrustworthy or because believing him implicates loving him back, and loving Hamlet only brings harm. But who is loving who in the context of the RDT? Language theory actually makes it quite clear. The lyric originally reads, if we escaped from the tunnel it'd be a disastrous scene, now let's escape. As you can see, it changes from we and let us to you and go. In other words, the person escaping the tunnel, quote, falling in love, is someone else, and the color code of red on escape will suggest Xander. Maybe Mai, but probably not. What we have so far is that David loved Xander, either platonically or romantically for you shippers, and Xander loved him in turn. But David believes loving him only brings disaster, both because he's a liar and inhuman, and because so far two of the people who trusted him the most, Xander and Ari, have wound up dead. Got it? Good, because this is about to get nonsensical. But it's attached to a quote from And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, a book originally called... Actually, maybe we don't talk about what the book was originally called. Anyways, the book is about several people meeting on an island and getting trapped there as they start to die one by one, killed by someone or other. Sorta close to a killing game in a way. The line itself has a character contemplating that staying on the island is a good and appealing choice, staying on the island being obviously code for dying. And the word but is followed by where to in mint, followed by the track to the so-called ideal country, with the track to the ideal country in black. The arrow attached to that phrase points to Utopia, Acora, Polyleritae, and Macarenses. You probably recognize Utopia as the perfect country described in the book of the same name by Thomas More, with the name meaning literally no place. The other names are essentially the same, other places in the book Utopia, which are called something akin to no place. You'll also notice a quote in the background: "If you're Hythlodaeus, then I must be Morus." It's worth noting that while those are characters from Utopia, as far as I can tell that line doesn't actually exist. Googling it with quotes only shows me the RDT related stuff. Also, this and the Utopia names appear yellow, if you're interested. Okay, what the fuck is going on? We have a lot of stuff, but none of it really seems related. Well, here's my best attempt at trying to piece it together. David gives Xander the order to escape the tunnel, so open himself up to love others. However, loving David is a bad idea because he's a monster who's better off dead, his opinion, right? So he asks himself, where should Xander escape? Where to? In other words, who should Xander like and be friends with? The words where to are in mint for either Teruko or Who. Who could work because she seeks guidance from David in general, but I feel this works better with Teruko and her theme of distrusting the others. Who should she trust? Who should she open up to? In which direction should she escape the tunnel? And the answer is Mai, apparently. I mean, it sort of fits. Everyone loves her, even David seemingly, as he points out in his phrase in the My page, she forgives everyone. She's shown in the bonus episodes to be generally optimistic and good-natured, always helping her friends when they need her. She is the ideal country the track leads to. She's the one everyone should trust and love. This is the only black line apart from the use, which is why there's a good chance this isn't actually about her, but I don't quite see who else it would be. Xander maybe, but he's already got 2 colors, so...
But I do think it fits the rest of the context. You see, David calls this black-colored person a so-called ideal country. He's skeptical of it. He literally relates them to places which are named after their non-existence.
This ideal country person is so perfect, David doesn't believe they can exist. This is also related to the text in the background. When Hythlodaeus in the book describes Utopia, Morus is skeptical and doesn't think it is as perfect as Hythlodaeus seems to think it is, though he admits some of the policies are good. So David is skeptical even of the blinding light Mayagasaki seems to be. There's another way to read that line though. Hythlodaeus literally means something along the lines of speaker of nonsense, while Morus is close to the word for fool. Thus, the line can be read, if you speak nonsense, then I must be a fool. And you could read that as, even if you're lying, I choose to believe you. So it's possible that even if David is skeptical of this utopian person, he still chooses to believe in them, despite how he usually treats people. This is an interpretation we'll come back to later, by the way. But of course, that only works if you follow the metaphor that escaping the tunnel on the track to the ideal country means opening yourself up to love and admire the ideal person. If you take the ideal country line more literally, you can imagine it means the ideal world, and interpret this in a more revolutionary sense. Xander, and probably Mai, seeing the bonus episodes and Xander's quote about her, clearly want to change society for the better, and perhaps that's what the ideal country is, a better society. An important point of Utopia is that Hythlodaeus believes in such radical ideas and policies that Europeans cannot accept them even if they're good, and Morus, being such an European, cannot understand or accept the ideal society Hythlodaeus describes, proving the other's point. When applied back to DMB and this revolutionary interpretation of the track to the ideal country, then Hythlodaeus represents Xander or Mai or whoever else, speaking to David of ideals he cannot understand. Perhaps because he doesn't think the world can change at all, and so to him there is no such thing as the track to the ideal country. Side note, this does work a bit better with the line's original context, but seeing all the excerpts which don't show up in the OCLGY, I hesitated to use that as evidence of anything. All of these possible interpretations, and probably more, are valid, as all of them sort of fit well enough. It's overall a really complex scene which is extremely open to interpretation even before you add in arguably the biggest mystery of the scene, that being, who the fuck is this? She doesn't look like Mai, not even close, and while her eyes vaguely look like Xander's, she can't be a relative of his on account of his entire family being dead, so people immediately jump to Diana Chiam. She's the named character who makes the most sense here, seeing as she's a girl we don't have a design for, but is still closely tied to David. She also has a similar facial structure, and the way her head is tilted is similar to how David has his head tilted in most of the MV. Of course, the question is whether or not Diana even, exists, which we'll have to get to later. The issue there is the cast list that shows up later, where Diana is noticeably absent. If the 7 characters in the cast list are the only ones who make an appearance, as stated by the text on the side, then this isn't Diana, since she's not there. However, that could be explained away by her apparent non-existence, again we'll get there. There is another possibility of the mysterious 7th person in the cast list whose name vaguely looks like Miss Naegi. I'll talk about this more later, but she's probably the person giving out the Hope Speak letter in that one scene, which could imply she maybe runs the academy or something. And if that's the case, it adds a 4th or 5th interpretation to the ideal country scene. It's possible the so-called ideal country is supposed to be Hope Speak, which is supposed to be in some ways an utopian academy. But we can infer from things like Min's backstory and that thing Mai and Xander were involved with, it probably isn't. In any case, this person is holding someone's hand. Given the state of affairs, that's probably David's hands. Though there's an argument to be made that the hand kinda looks like it's wearing a glove, but it also looks like you can see a nail, so yeah, probably David. There actually isn't much else we can discuss here, since we're just lacking critical information as to what the hell is going on here. So we're moving on.
所詮だけの騒ぎのわめきの狂いの世界は変わらないだからでも届けならしに出ましょう僕と一緒に遊びましょう
This one kicks off with a cute joke. The song says "so then" and David completes with his iconic "I'm guilty as charged." Except it's crossed out because we're not there yet, we're still with Herclub David here. Anyways, this kind of a chorus is the thesis of the entire song. Even if you make noise, the world won't change. Clearly in line with David's philosophy. Though worth noting, the original lyric is "even if we cry, make noise, etc." I guess you could interpret the change as saying that David himself doesn't even try to make noise and go mad because he always knew the world wouldn't change. Cry is colored dark blue, again either Shay or Array. This is one of the lines which make me favor Array over Shay for dark blue, since while Shay doesn't have a connection to crying, with Array we can point to the playground scene with David for a point when she cried. Also worth noting, despite Shay having a generally darker color scheme, the color of her colored letter in the class trial dialog boxes is actually lighter than Array's, so it sorta makes sense to give Array the darker one. Make noise in green, which could be because David sees Teruko as annoying, but who has a more direct connection, with her cider playing being the noise. Shout for Xander or Ace works with both since they're both loud, and go mad in red. This won't be the last time we see it, and while it could go to Xander if you squint, I think it works best with Veronica, who is clearly mad, and all the power to her. After that, the world in soft blue makes me think this one is for Shay. After all, it gets surrounded by YouTube comments, so it could be the world of entertainment. Effects artist, play button in her eyes, I rest my case. Change in purple for Charles, I'm not calling it plum no matter what Asirax tells me. It works given the vertiginous pace of his character development, he changed pretty quick. And then the YouTube comments themselves. You'll notice they are from different time periods, so I'll list them in chronological order. I like that 6-lettered name is a protagonist who also plays the antag. 14 years ago, 302 likes. That's Teruko, she's the protagonist, but is often quite antagonistic, and so often gets compared to other characters she has nothing to do with because she's mean. 1-letter name and 4-letter name totally swapped places. 13 years ago, 1453 likes. That's for Shay and Array, referencing the theory that they disguise as each other so Shay could avoid Arturo, and the dead body is actually Shay, and Array is still disguised as her in the trial because she doesn't want to be suspected. Something like that, not gonna get into it now, but I don't quite see the theory if you ask me. What's notable about this comment is that it dates the MV to exactly this point in time, as in the hiatus between the two parts of Chapter 2. This theory only started existing after the Array VDA as far as I'm aware, and it will stop existing after Chapter 2 ends, either because it was confirmed or denied. What this means is that someone 5 years from now isn't meant to look at it through the perspective of whatever chapter we're on at that point, but rather they will have to keep in mind when it was first released. This is an important observation for later. Let's place Spot the Komaeda, 10 years ago, 2419 likes. Likely referring to David's heel turn, comparing him to a completely different character just because they follow the same vaguely defined antagonist archetype.4-letter name anyone? 8 years ago, 55 likes. Likely stands for Mastermind, so it's referencing the obsession all fandom audiences seem to have to sniff out the Mastermind as early as possible. There are a lot of characters that fit the 4-letter name, but I think that maybe VIII, since his Mastermind theory is the most popular and well-founded from the characters with 4-letter names, at least on Tumblr. Could also be Eden, though she is a popular Mastermind guess as well. 5-letter name is like the Byakuya Nagito Kokichi of the cast, 4 years ago, 3 likes. Same idea as the Spot the Komaeda comments, but this one explicitly talks about David as he's the only character with a 5-letter name. But now is a good time to talk about the nature of these comments. A lot of people assume these are comments in-universe, but this comment and the Komaeda one actually make that unlikely. If you remember from Chapter 2, Episode 2, Veronica doesn't remember any killing game like the one from DRDT ever happening before. Of course, we know the THH game did probably happen as this is set post-tragedy, but Veronica not remembering it could imply it's been erased from history. No one knows about it, so no one should be able to draw the link between Byakuya and David. Naito also brings the caveat that the STR2 killing game was never even televised as far as we're aware, so how people know about him is also a question. Not to mention Kokichi and all the problems V3 brings depending on your interpretation of that game. The only way to work around this is by going all in on the idea that all the killing games are fictional, and that's why people know about them. But we hear about the tragedy even in bonus episodes, which supposedly have nothing to do with the television show the RTT is meant to be, and while you could argue that the bonus episodes are just bonus episodes in the TV show as well, now you're essentially arguing that these few comments are more important than every other thing we've heard about the RTT so far. Not to mention why repeat the same twist V3 already did. The point I'm trying to get at is that I believe these comments likely don't exist in-universe, but are just poking fun at discourse from our universe. I'll get to the time discrepancy in a moment, but for now, I just hope 6-letter name doesn't go crazy and kill in Chapter 3. That will be way too predictable. I can't tell how many years ago that was, but it's got 103 likes. That's about Arturo. There's a striking amount of people who think he'll be the Chapter 3 killer just because he vaguely fits the stereotypes. Only Veronica can match his Chapter 3 killer vibes according to a lot of people, but her name isn't 6-letter long. 5-letter name will obviously die in Chapter 5. Unknown time, 24 likes. That's David, since again only name with 5 letters. A lot of people started predicting this after his heel turn. Everyone in the comment section is a fucking idiot. 0 seconds ago, 0 likes. Objectively correct, okay, I'm joking. This screen is just lightheartedly poking fun at the community. But the time, why are the comments so many years apart? There is a worrying implication here, which is the time loop theory. This theory is based on the book Forever Dead that Veronica talks about here in her introduction. It's a book that doesn't actually exist, but from the description Veronica gives, it's about a boy being stuck in a time loop where all his friends die, until he gets desensitized to it and starts getting bored. He also gets Mukuroed at one point, apparently. This seems to correlate with a secret passage in the code of the RDT Tumblr's About page, which also has a character word from Hope and Despair and all that biz. The idea is that one of the characters in the RDT is like this book's protagonist, stuck in a time loop. That's obviously quite an out there theory, and while I have some thoughts on it, I'll keep this related just to the MB. Some say that these comments could be further alluding to this. However, I don't think this is the case. For one, like I said, I don't even believe these are meant to be real in-universe comments because of the mainline references. But more importantly, this really doesn't prove anything of the sort. I mean, if we're on a time loop, the older comments wouldn't stick around and keep track of the time which actually passed, they will disappear when time reverses. You know, that's how time loops work. So yeah, regardless of whether time loop theory is true or not, this isn't good evidence for it in my eyes. So, what does it mean? I believe this is a visual representation of David's philosophy as stated in the lyrics of the scene: the world won't change. Even as the years pass, as more and more fangams come out, people in the fangam community make the same assumptions, make the same comparisons. How many times have you heard that a certain character is the Nagito of a game, or the Byakuya, or the Kyoko? That this character gives off Chapter 3 killer vibes. Hell, the protagonist attacks like an antagonist comments reads exactly like the way some people talk about Damon Maitsu from Eden's Garden. down to the weird use of antagonist as some kind of character archetype instead of a role in the story, the thing the word actually means. What presumably David is really calling out in that comment, calling us all idiots, is the inherent silliness of wild theories like, anything related to the mastermind in chapter 2, and a reductionist analysis of characters based on perceived patterns and tropes that really don't have any predictive power in truth. And yet we still make the same theories, we still make the same assumptions and comparisons. The world won't change. Well, that sounds quite mean the way I phrased it, but it's important to keep in mind this isn't the dev saying we're idiots for theorizing about the murderer or whatever. And this also isn't me, I've done a lot of this stuff as well, and I'll do it in the rest of the video as well. The person saying this is David, and David is wrong about a lot of things. It's crazy I even have to clarify that, but given some of the takes I've seen on Tsumuri, a character who is much more explicitly in the wrong than David, I think it bears repeating. This is a joke scene pointing out some silly stuff the fandom community says sometimes. So, therefore, consequently, for that reason, thus, we're moving on. Make a lemon bomb and explode it is a reference to the short story Lemon by Kaishi Motoshiro, and that's why the now directly after points to the lemon on top of the TV in the background. This one took me a moment, but I think I got something. The story is about a man with a lung sickness who is close to death. So there's connection 1 to David. Remember, he's trying to get himself voted out, which will get him killed regardless of whether or not he believes he's the blackened. The man in the story then finds and buys a lemon, which makes him inexplicably happy. That's what's being described in the background text. The lemon sort of represents his will to live, apparently. What's important for our purposes now is what the lemon bomb actually is. Basically, at the end of the story, the man leaves the lemon on top of a pile of books and runs off, imagining the lemon is a time bomb which will blow up the pile of books. This represents childish mischievousness, and is, in a way, the man reconnecting with his childhood self in his final moments, to allow himself to enjoy the last of his life. At least, that's a possible interpretation of the story. And I believe this theme of childhood is why the dev chose to represent this lyric with emojis, because it's essentially a juvenile way of writing. This ties in quite neatly with what David does in the later half of episode 11. He believes he's about to die, so he lets loose and tries to enjoy the last of his life by revealing some of his true philosophy, as well as insulting everyone and their mothers. Like he tells says, being such an irredeemable asshole is quite cathartic. Being a dick is his quote, lemon bomb. And that's why the location of the lemon is also brought attention to, although that's admittedly also in the original LFGI. It's on top of a TV, possibly representative of the Killing Game. When the lemon bomb goes off, the TV, the Killing Game, will be destroyed for David's amusement. Either because they'll all die for choosing the wrong blackened, or because David thinks only he'll die and that will be the end of the game for him. That's why in the next line, game is in cyan for Mono TV. We're talking about enjoying the last of the Killing Game. And in that main, while together by itself will fit Xander the most, as in David and Xander together, with the context of enjoying the Killing Game, I could see it going to Veronica. The full line, recontextualize, will be even if you make a ruckus, the world won't change, so let's instead act childishly and enjoy the last of this Killing Game, you and I, as we near my death. But, you may wonder, is there an answer to what the lemon actually is? The lemon bomb is one thing, the lemon is another. The lemon is a life purpose which is left behind while making the lemon bomb, and this purpose is referenced in the background text. Well, I'll have to get back to it later, but I believe the lemon is actually representative of David's speeches, his career. They're what was giving his life purpose, and now he's destroying all of that in this childish display. Again, this justification is a bit later in the video, so you'll just have to trust me for now. For starters, you'll notice a few things in this segment I already explained in the beginning. You in black, that guy in orange, this guy green, and are all just idiots goes to Xander again, I saw you getting there. Bye 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 with the same colors as before, and the same play on goodbye triangle, see you again square as before. I is in cyan here for Mono TV, because we're carrying over the theme of enjoying the last of the Killing Game from the line before. Whoever else is in gray for Fuckboy David because it's a flippant line. He doesn't care who those other people are, they're all just idiots. Anonymous in green, I don't know, I guess you could vaguely relate it to Teruko's secretive past or whose name, since David sometimes called her Julia. Or maybe the important part is that the word hope is excluded, like anonymous, no name, no identity, hopeless nobody. Sorta fits David's views on both of them, especially if Fu has a hopeless child secret. And yes, I am trying for Olympic gold in mental gymnastics, why do you ask? Finally, let's play in orange, because, I don't know, David likes Xander and would like to play with him or something. They're all kinda energetic, so it vaguely fits. There's also text pointing out a 5-pointed star and a 4-pointed star. Yes, that's what they are, good job. You could try to relate the 4-pointed star to the Star of Bethlehem, which guided the 3 wise men to Jesus, as David's inspirational speeches driving people to good things, for example. But an explanation I feel makes more sense is that the 5-pointed star, representing David's more positive act, is breaking down and losing its edge, its points, just like David's front. But of course, that's not the most important part of the scene, because for a brief moment, a crossword flashes on screen. And this crossword? Well, if I was going insane before, this is where I start going literature girl insane. Everyone I know on Tumblr has made that joke at least once, including me, but I don't care, I'm bringing it to YouTube, it's funnier the second time. See, after this thing appears, footnotes and numerals will start showing up, and that includes footnote 1 currently on screen. In this situation, it is better to use full names over nicknames. Exclude our protagonist, he is not that person. I've seen people read into this more than I believe necessary. These footnotes are usually pretty straightforward, and this one is no exception. It's just telling us how to solve the crossword. You use the cast name, full names instead of nicknames, so Shirley instead of Shay, Alexander instead of Xander, that stuff. And you exclude the protagonist of the MB, David, because he is not one of the people listed as that person. Let me reiterate, protagonist of the MB, he's not replacing Teruko, and he's not that person because that's the way everyone but him is described in the crosswords. Everyone else is just that person except David. Which you could read as him being arrogant again, like everyone else doesn't matter, only me, which, yeah, sure I guess. And here's the solution. As you can see, for the lack of David, we have my. You may be wondering about the placement and if there's any meaning to who intersects who, but I don't think that's the case. Sure, there's things like Wit only crossing Charles and Ace only crossing Levi, but it doesn't work on most cases, like Who only crossing Shay, Eden only crossing Rose, Min only crossing Are, Veronica crossing like everyone, so yeah, that doesn't matter too much. What does matter are the numerals attached to each character. This will show up throughout the video attached to certain lyrics which are connected in some way to the character the numeral belongs to. It will all make more sense once we start seeing them. One final note, I don't think the footnotes are connected to the numerals by number, so like footnote 1 doesn't belong to Xander just because he has Roman numeral 1, because what would this even mean attached to Xander? Some footnotes do show up at the same time as numerals, and those are connected though. Well, I did tell you it was going to get wild, so... This scene is actually really important as it gives us good insight on David's feelings towards Xander, and it's the scene I've been talking about whenever I gave Xander the idiot lines. For starters, both the top and the bottom white text talk about electrocution, drawing a straight line to Xander who died from electrocution. This quite literally framed the scene, giving context for the other phrases. The yellow text is also indicative, this scene is about Xander. It's a passage from The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, where the fox gives a message of friendship to the little prince. It says that it is just like any of the other hundreds of thousands of foxes, and the prince is just like any of the other hundreds of thousands of little boys. But if they befriend each other, phrased as tame in the quote, then they will become special to each other. This fits the conversation David had with Xander in chapter 1. David doesn't want to be Xander's idol, and Xander doesn't want to be David's idol. They want to be in the eyes of the other, just like any of the other hundreds of thousands of men in the world. They do want to be special to each other, but by befriending, not simply by idolizing. This is likely what David ended up appreciating about Xander, the willingness to look past the ultimate inspirational speaker and instead try to connect with David GM, unlike Hu or Ari or anyone else in the group, who in David's eyes were content to simply see the speaker as someone to admire and seek advice from, and not one boy like $100,000. In particular, the line where Xander says David is just as human as the rest of us might have hit the speaker like a critical hit, knowing how he views his own humanity. Does that make sense? I hope so. By the way, I do want to address something. There is a very real possibility that David originally approached Xander not to befriend him, but to manipulate him. He knew he could, since Xander admired him, and he had already proved useful thanks to his superior strength. In fact, that scene as a whole just screams of love bombing to me, a manipulation tactic where the manipulator showers the victim with praise and affection to gain their favor. However, at some point or another, it's also clear David started caring about Xander, if something is important and all that. Make of this what you will. Anyways, the text to essay is a passage from Alice in Wonderland, where Alice laments on how much pleasanter things were back at home, yet still says she finds this new way of life curious. This last part makes it unlikely that this is talking about the killing game, especially with the rest of the context of the scene, so I believe there are two interpretations. Either it was much pleasanter when Xander is alive and the curious part is just a lie David is telling himself to cope with his death, or it was much pleasanter when David didn't care about anyone, so he wasn't hurt when people like Xander died, but he still finds this whole caring about people to be somewhat curious. Make of that what you will. Then the text in color not defined by current color theory is a passage from our favorite book, Flowers of Buffoonery, where the narrator speaks of a man crushed by reality putting on a show of endurance. He also claims life's a farce, so it's better to make it a good farce, even though the narrator doesn't think they can achieve that. Again, back to Xander, David was crushed by reality when Xander died, putting on a show of endurance by keeping up his facade of inspirational speaker for a while longer. He considers life a farce for obvious reasons, his entire life is a lie, but he tries to enjoy it, either referring to hanging out with Xander or the lemon bomb explanation from earlier. And yet, he can't reach a real life because 1, he feels obligated to keep lying, and 2, because he's not human, how could his life be real? Something like that. In pink, note can't read. This was written by Sheridan 19, The Lore Thickens. And finally, and the big one, literally, in red, I hate the things that I love and I love the things that I hate. This isn't a quote from anywhere as far as I can tell, so this is 100% David's feelings. And again, Xander's in, this is probably about Xander. This is the love-hate feelings I was describing earlier. Here's my best shot at interpreting this. On one hand, Xander represents everything David hates. He's an optimistic person who wants to change the world, which David considers impossible. He's a fan of David's speeches, a group of people David clearly holds some contempt for. He doesn't seem easy to manipulate, seeing as he's clearly smart and is pretty good at reading most people. He is someone who opposes David's worldview, someone his belief system demands he hate, but he doesn't. For one reason or another, he grows attached to Xander. Perhaps he was inspired by his attitude, possibly it was just that Xander was able to ignore David's speaker persona and look at him as an equal. Who knows? But David ended up considering the rebel someone important. He loves the things he hates. And then, that inkling of trust David had placed on Xander is shattered, as Xander is revealed to have attempted murder, and in his idiocy, he got himself killed, leaving David alone. He broke and disappeared. And David hates it not just because Xander's death hurt him, but because he was wrong about Xander. He misjudged his character. That's part of the reason he opposes the idea that Xander attempted murder so strongly, I believe. And in all this, he ends up considering Xander an idiot for getting himself killed, and a bastard for sneaking his murderous intent past David. He hates the thing he loves. Alright, was that good? I hope so. Because I need to be in your good graces as we arrive at the single weirdest frame of the MB. What is happening here? Alright, so first the funny part. Since there's a scream in the cover, we can consider to be lyrics, and thus color theory applies. And since it's yellow, it's for speaker David. Now that's fitting. Alright, now the issue. You'll notice Suspicious Gaps has footnote 11, which is, I admit to lying. There is no one named 5-letter name, 5-letter last name. I am, and always have been, an only child. What? So this is what I was referring to when I said Diana might not exist. That name fits Diana GM perfectly. It also fits David, but that doesn't make much sense. It could maybe imply Diana is writing the footnotes. I mean, footnote 1 does talk about David in the third person, but footnote 12 is phrased like the person writing it is part of the killing game, so the theory doesn't work. It also can't be Giles, because neither Arturo nor Felicity, Arturo's sister's name according to the Q&A, fits the first name. I guess Chong is possible technically, but it doesn't really make sense since we've never heard of Min having or not having siblings. So that kinda has to be Diana, but what are we implying here? She doesn't exist? It's possible, I guess. In the most recent Q&A, the dev gave some info on the siblings of the characters who've been mentioned in the main story, but Diana is missing from the list. But what motivation will David have to lie about that? Maybe the phrase it's attached to can help? Suspicious gaps, like suspicious gaps in memory? But that doesn't really work. David does remember having a sister, so did he forget she didn't exist? How does that work? Like, oops! I accidentally made up I have a sister! Forgot I'm an only child, Lamau! Okay, but what are the gaps? What are the arrows pointing to? Top left is the snake's head and a bit of blood. Okay, snake represents liars and blood is blood. Top right is the dresser, kinda? Or the candle or the teapot. The arrow in particular seems to point to the teapot, which we later learn is an assassin's teapot. In other words, a teapot which can contain two liquids and can be poured selectively. It's called an assassin's teapot because you can pour tea in one cup and poison in the other. Alright, also deception, don't know what the dresser will mean, so we can run with this for now. Bottom right is, I guess, the safe or the rope. Safe could be for secrets, but rope could be for suicide. Bottom left is the TV. Somewhat the lemon, but the TV mostly. Lies, secrets, TV. Oh my god, Diana is the mastermind of Danganronpa Despair. No. Yeah, I still have no idea what's going on. Maybe that quote that flashes right after can help? It's a quote from Catch-22 where, spoilers, the protagonist remembers the death of a character named Snowden. The takeaway the protagonist gets from the memory is that man without spirit is only matter, so it's up to man to figure out the meaning of their own existence, their purpose. That's what ripeness is all means. That this life purpose is the essential part of humanity. What the fuck does this have to do with David? Yeah, I'm sorry if you were expecting a proper explanation of this scene, because I don't have one. However, I can make an insanely far-fetched theory and call it an interpretation, so let's go. So first, I think the footnote is a double lie. David's lying about lying. He does actually have a sister, but for some reason he's trying to deny it. He's pulling an Arturo. Something happened with his sister and he's trying to distance himself from it. That's where the snake with the blood and the safe come in, the rope possibly implying a suicide. Remember the family history of depression? It's possible that was just a lie, but the best liars know when to tell the truth. I think it's likely David does have a family history of depression, definitively fits a few of the attitudes he displays in the MB, and used that to lie about what his secret could be. So it's possible Diana died and the teapot... well, maybe it's actually meant to be the candle, like a candle that goes out, bursts out? It's also possible that whatever happened to Diana would have been hinted at in David's motive video. You know, those videos we never saw because Xander struck first? Yeah, that's my explanation for the TV. But why would this bad thing which happened to Diana be in David's motive video? That would imply David doesn't remember it. That's what the Snowden line could mean. See, in Catch-22, Snowden's death is an event from early in the book, but that the protagonist only remembers in full at the end. So, hear me out. Diana is represented by Snowden. She died or something while David was at Hope's Peak, and David started lying about never having a sister to sort of suppress the feelings that brought him, kinda like Whit does with his mother. This somehow reminded David that his life needed purpose or something. Maybe the lemon is related? Is Diana the person who got him into inspirational speaking in the first place? Something like that, maybe. I have absolutely no idea. That's not so much a theory as it is just me mashing everything together and hoping it works out. But so far that's the best I have, so I'm just gonna leave it here, move on and pretend nothing happened. Wait, actually maybe I should play a bit more. Yeah, sorry about that. Anyways, we have here what I affectionately call Roman numeral hell because we're going to speedrun through a bunch of different numerals really quickly. But first, let's explain what this section of the lyrics actually means. The issue with this section is that it's been so incredibly mistranslated, it's sorta difficult to gather the actual meaning from the David MB. Thus, I think it's best to first see what this part says in the original LCI, then adapt it for the lyric changes. I think, therefore I am troubled, that's the ego cogito ergo turbatus sum. If without, brittle things are broken. Right now, why do I cry? Right now, why do I go insane? Things like the substance of the arts, you will be happier not knowing. God is dead, you see. Let's be brainwashed, let's go do it. This relates back to the original plot of LCI, where a girl, her name is Ayaka, and that's mentioned in 2 fucking sources in the entire English-speaking internet. goes crazy after reading too much. The substance of the arts refers to the books she's read, which have given her a new perspective on the world. However, you will be happier not knowing, because the new perspective is a much more troubling view of the world. She now understands all of its issues. I think, therefore I am troubled. The brittle things which can be broken by doubting are the preconceived notions we have of the world, with doubting here being called for engaging in philosophy. After all, doubting everything is the base of philosophy. A more complete phrase of the I think therefore I am phrase is actually dubito ergo cogito, cogito ergo sum. I doubt therefore I think therefore I am. But breaking these preconceived notions troubles the protagonist. Right now, why do I cry? Right now, why do I go insane? This is why you'd be happier not knowing. The phrase God is dead here, I believe, is used with God as a stand-in for the previous establishment, the way Christianity was the previous establishment when Nietzsche originally wrote that phrase. The protagonist caps it off by expressing a desire to go back to not knowing. To be brainwashed, let's go do it. Got that? Good, because now we gotta translate. For starters, for ego cogito ergo turbatus sum, I think it's worth noting the original LCI has the phrase ego cogito ergo fatigo, which is more akin to I think so I'm tired, which isn't what the lyric says, so I don't know why it's there, but now I'm going insane. Actually not important. The lyric here doesn't actually change, it's just I think therefore I am troubled in Latin. The next one does, however, and so do the next two as stated in the beginning of the video. From if we doubt to if you doubt, why do I cry to why do you cry, why do I go insane to why do you go insane. I believe this is to highlight the main difference between David and Nayaka, and okay, maybe I should address something. As I was making this video I learned the thing I mentioned in footnote 10, which you did read, right? I told you it was important. That thing being that, in a lot of cases in Japanese, telling apart we and you is practically impossible. I already kinda suspected it because of the amount of times it happens. However, I still think it's possible the changes were made intentionally, because of another thing I noticed after making that introduction to language theory, and that's in the credit scene, which lists everyone related to the video who has nothing to do with the RDT. I'll talk about it more when we get to it, but if you're really sharp, you've noticed what I'm talking about. See that name there? Yes, Colleen Egu! This helps to confirm everything I've speculated about. Oh, you have no idea what I'm talking about? But didn't you see in the start of the video? Colleen is the person who made the translation I've been taking screenshots for, like I clarified all the way at the start. Talk about a Chekhov's gun, huh? And she's listed as the translator for the wiki. She's a translator. What's my point here? Isn't it possible that the devs just took the video from her since it's easier to find than the actual original video? Well, yes, but at the end of the day they're still aware of the translation. In fact, some word choices are quite similar between the Colina video and the David MV, and even some of the mistranslations can be traced back to this one video. Which makes me wonder if maybe the dev doesn't actually know Japanese, but that doesn't really matter. So when I talk about changing we to you, keep in mind this is my justification for doing that. After all, we tends to make more sense in the context of the song anyways. It may not be important, but it's important to me, so I'm gonna bring it up every now and then. I believe this is to highlight the main difference between David and Sayaka. See, Sayaka originally believed she could change the world, tried to get others to rebel against the system, but after reading a lot and understanding too much, she became disillusioned with the idea, and that disillusionment is why she's crying, going insane. Meanwhile, David never had a turning point like that. He always believed the world was awful and wouldn't change. He always saw through it in his mind. For him, the brittle things were always broken. He doesn't need to doubt them. This is especially sad seeing the background text in dark blue. It's a famous passage from The Little Prince where the fox tells the boy his secret, that it is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eyes. The brittle things, whatever they may be, are still important, essential, but the heartless David cannot see them. Again, always broken. And because he's always seen through it, he's long since accepted how troubling the world is. He has no more tears to cry over it, no more energy to go insane. This is reiterated by the background text. The dark blue text to the side in the Go Insane lyric is from Hamlet, a line where the titular character claims to still possess some of his faculties despite his apparent madness, and to be able to tell friend from foe, a Hulk from a handsaw. In David's mind, you're the one crying when he confronts you with the truth. You're the one going insane, but he's perfectly fine, nothing's changed for him. This could also tie back to the text at the top of the Go Insane line, which reads a cat has 9 additional lives, with 9 additional highlighted, We've already drawn the connection between David and cats, and highlighting 9 additional I believe is meant to highlight the supposed superiority cats have over humans. The lives aren't actually important, it's the supposed superiority of having additional lives we have to pay attention to. Because David doesn't go insane at the horrors and injustices of the world, he sees himself as superior to those who are shaken by it. At least that's what makes sense in my mind. Since we don't know how much David actually reads, things like Substance of the Arts may just allude to the vague idea of knowing more than other people, instead of literally being about books. I guess it's still possible though. The line about happiness I believe retains the same meaning, and the only reason it's different is stylization purposes. Same with God is Dead. Finally, David tells you to become brainwashed, go do it, without wishing he could be brainwashed himself, because again he doesn't feel hurt by the truth about the world. He probably is, but you know. Alright, now it's time for the thing that gives the section its name, the numerals, and color theory as well. First, numeral 2, ego cogito ergo turbatus sum. This one belongs to rows. I tried looking into the symbolism of the numbers, but as a warning, they're usually pretty inconclusive. Like, here, look. The first Google result for number 2 is that it represents teamwork, service, love, friendship, patience, personal growth, learning, emotional balance, partnership, acceptance, peace, bonding, and mutual interest. Like, yes, I'm sure you can relate some of these to rows, but that's just what happens when you list every possible characteristic under the sun. And in fact, the one thing most websites could agree on was that 2 represents harmony in relationships, or that it's a supremely feminine force, or whatever the hell that means. This doesn't apply too well to rows. What's my point with this? Basically, I'll point out when I think a numeral could have numerological significance, but otherwise just assume they don't. Tangent over. So, I think therefore I am, ego cogito ergo sum, states that the only thing we can be truly and absolutely sure exists is our own reasoning and consciousness. This fits Rose decently well, as she's established her photographic memory causes her trouble separating what's real, what's a memory, what's a dream, etc. The addition of turbatus changes the meaning to I think therefore I am troubled, which fits Rose even more directly, seeing the things her mind produces, though the original ergo fatigo would have fit even better probably. Also, turbatus meaning troubled or disturbed, and color grey makes sense because, well, David sure is disturbed. Then numeral 3, this is for Charles. If you doubt, brittle things are broken. This likely refers back to his dead brother he doesn't remember, with brittle things either meaning his memories of the preconceived notion he's an only child. I say this with such certainty because of the quote in the background, which yes, is included in numeral analysis, it's much more obvious in some other cases. Apart from the word secret, the essential here likely refers to his memories and his relationships with his loved ones. The text is dark blue, and if you want to try and extend color theory to the background, you'll notice very quickly dark blue will have to be RA due to how prevalent it is. For color theory, broken in red could belong to Xander or Mai due to death, but I believe it fits better with Veronica, due to the hidden quote in the code of her character profile. When something is broken, it can never be pieced together in quite the same way again. The same goes for people. Spooky. Even if it kinda ignores context, I think it works well enough. And then Doubting Orchid for Levi. Yeah, he's kind of a weird one, he only has 2 words, so he just gets given this based on color. I guess he does sort of express doubt every now and then maybe. It's not too important. Numeral 4 is for Ari, and this is one of the ones which can be given numerological meaning. Remember when I said to keep in mind this video is dated to this point in the series? Well, that's important because 4 is a number often associated with death, and Ari was the last person to die before the MV came out. As for the phrase itself, right now why do you cry, is likely related to Ari's breakdown in the playground, which David witnessed, or to whatever David said to her after Ari stopped listening to that one conversation, or to the fact that she's dead. In any case, cry is color-coded light blue, which is Nico, and yeah. You could argue it should be Ari since her numeral is on screen, but this color actually also shows up with Nico's numeral, so it's not an issue. Right now, why do you go insane is 5 or of course it's Ace. Yeah, he's got a track record of going quite insane, so it fits, though the background text is peculiar. For one, the a cat has 9 additional lives thing. This fits with Ace surviving a murder attempt, and mentioning a cat in particular could also be connected back to Nico in a more abstract way. Then, the quote from Hamlet for Ace is probably referring to his philosophies in starting chapter 2, where he considers everyone a foe, an enemy, and tries to rationalize it however he can. The quote reads like a lie under this interpretation, as we know Ace is wrong to distrust literally everyone else, but it's a lie Ace believes, a lie he tells himself. He attempts to take control of his circumstances by cutting himself off from all the others, and deciding to rely only on his judgment. Aside from that, Go Insane is in red, probably for Veronica, because she's been known to get a little silly. Then, okay, how about we skip this one for the moment and instead talk about the elephant in the room? Yeah, numeral 11, God is dead. That's for Mai, because of course it's Mai. By the way, 11 is sometimes related to leadership and bringing out the best in others, as well as nobility or higher consciousness, among a lot of other stuff. It's possible that's why it was chosen for Mai. As for the lyric it's attached to, well, I think we all jump to the same conclusion, but let's not bury the girls just yet. God could represent something else here. For example, the original meaning of God is dead as used by Nietzsche in The Gay Science? What, like the RDT theorizing? Refers to how loss of faith in an institution, like a church, leads to changes in the status quo. So it's possible Hope's peak is the God, and Mai's actions related to whatever that document was involved a loss of faith in the academy, and everything which comes with it. This could even be related to what comes after, become brainwashed, go do it. If HPA is propaganda, which makes everyone love ultimates, can be considered brainwashing anyways. But that's a bit roundabout, isn't it? Especially because God is colored red, and that kinda has to be Mai. Neither Veronica or Xander really fit all that well, but the way everyone talks about Mai definitely makes her akin to a god in some way, and considering everything else surrounding the girl, it's very possible the phrase is meant to be read literally. Mai is dead. To add to this, 11 is colored grey, and this is the only numeral which precedes the lyrics directly which is actually colored. The rest are all white except two cases where the numerals are more stylized. I don't quite know what this will have to do with post-reveal David, mind you, but it could simply be that the line is pretty ominous and kinda depressing, especially if it is meant to be read as Mai is dead. And even more worrying for Mai's well-being, text flashes on the screen right after the brainwash part, describing the Kubler-Ross model of the 5 stages of grief. You know, that thing that's most commonly associated to how people react to death. Footnote 20 tells us it's considered by many to be outdated, providing little to no insight on human nature. Which is true, and the sentiment of this model is stupid is echoed by the emoticon also on screen. I guess the idea is that David doesn't deal with grief like most humans on account of not seeing himself as one, so the model is useless in his eyes, maybe? Anyways, if seen in context, it seems like David grieved over Mai and it didn't connect to the stages of grief. But that still sorta implies Mai is dead, so... Aside from that, time for a little extra color theory. That is yellow, probably because David's career and facade as a speaker is completely dead, and brainwash is pink for wit. That would be a worrying word for the guy to get, until you consider that being brainwashed in this context is remaining ignorant of the world's issues. This clearly relates back to the whole his mom is dead and he omits the fact thing, where Wit purposefully ignores the issues in his life. And speaking of remaining ignorant, don't think I forgot we skipped the line. Things like Substance of the Arts is 14 for Veronica, which makes sense, her talent is related to art. It feels a bit tame for her, but it does work. However, you'll notice Substance of the Arts is green, and this is the line I mentioned before, really made me think green is for who. Because while it fits perfectly with who's they're playing, I struggle to see Teruko's connection to the arts. Plus, it helps that Who and Veronica may end up having some character foil thing going on, long story. You might think that because Veronica's numeral lingers on the screen for a while, her full line should actually be things like Substance of the Arts, remaining ignorant isn't that happiness. But the problem is that Veronica isn't ignorant of the substance of the arts, since, well, her talent is knowing about the substance of the arts, and she wouldn't be any happier not knowing about the substance of the arts. Again, she enjoys horror, so I don't see the full line working with her. The numeral just is still on screen because the line is still on screen. No, remaining ignorant isn't that happiness is exclusively 15 for Wit, who as stated before, lives in denial over his mother's death and just generally seems to prefer not to think about the horrors of the killing game. Footnote 15 attached to happiness is ignorance is bliss is an idiom used to say that it is better to remain ignorant about certain harsh truths in order to avoid causing oneself stress. The expression comes from a 1742 Thomas Gray poem, Ode on a Distant Prospect of Eton College, where ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. This is the idiom the line is referencing, so there's nothing too wild here. It's just more of the same. The color coding also isn't too difficult to understand. Happiness in quotes for cheery David because he pretends to be happy, but since the word is in quotes, it represents a fake happiness. Ignorant in red for Xander probably, keeping in theme with the idiot motif he's got going on, but also because he's ignorant to the fact David's happiness is a lie. And isn't that in cyan for Mono TV because, yeah, I got nothing. But maybe it's like, isn't that happiness because Mono TV is a machine and can't know what emotions are? We can go with that, seeing as it's not too important. But the reason I skipped this scene for a moment there is the text on the background. Attached to footnote 4, subtract 4 due to tetraphobia. Footnote 4 simply defines tetraphobia as the practice of avoiding the number 4. It is most common in East Asia. This superstition arises from the fact that the number 4 can be read similar to the word death in multiple languages. All we learned from this is why we're subtracting 4 in the first place. But okay, let's do that. Let's grab whatever numeral is on screen and subtract 4... Right. This is the only scene in the entire MB where two numerals are on screen at the same time. Remember when I said there was precedent for Veronica showing up in random places to make things confusing? This is what I was referring to. But let's go ahead and subtract 4 anyways. Veronica's 14 minus 4 is 10, I'm good at maths, but since we still haven't seen numeral 10, I'll leave it there for now. You could also take it literally and just take the 4 out of 14 to make 1, which will connect Veronica to Xander, but since we're dealing with numerals and taking 4 out of 14 in this way with numerals just gives 10 again, I think it's not too relevant. Footnote 15, also on screen, turns into 11, which is the footnote for oh, it's the Diana thing. I'm not gonna lie, this little relation by tetraphobia is part of what got me thinking that maybe Diana died and David started lying about it, sorta like what Whit does with his mom. But again, that theory is insanely deranged, so I'm not sure how important this is. But let's stop beating around the bush. Not only is the line pink, aside from the area around the 4s, in mint maybe, it appears when Whit's numeral does, so it's likely related to him. So if we subtract 4 from his 15 and get 11, which is oh, it's mice. Oh, God is dead. Yeah, like usual, Whit cannot stop himself from looking like the mastermind whenever he can. This little connection will seem to imply Whit was involved in Mice's death, which is sorta worrying. To be fair, just being involved in Mice's death won't necessarily make him the mastermind or anything, which I'll get to back later, but it's still not a great look. But maybe we don't have to jump to that yet. Maybe it's not about maybe it's about his mom. Elizabeth means God is my oath, which is sorta close to God is dead if you really squint. Yeah, probably not. Unless Whit's mom is somehow related to Mai in some way, I sorta doubt it. But hey, that's why Veronica's there, alongside footnote 15. Maybe the tetraphobia thing doesn't apply to it. In hell the copium. Alright, to be or not to be is an obvious reference to the Hamlet soliloquy, where Hamlet contemplates on life and death to live or not to live. The protagonist of the song contemplates on this matter before giving up on deciding themselves and instead asking to be chosen for, democratically. So, like the emoticon implies, they hold a general disregard for their own life, fits David, and you may have noticed the line has been somewhat recontextualized to be about class trials. However, there is something more here. While the background text in to be and not to be is just the soliloquy itself and doesn't add much, the background text between the phrases does hold some meaning. I'll talk about the one to the side more when I get to the numeral, but first check out the text on the bottom. It's from The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, and it describes the basic premise of the story. The conditions of living in Omelas, essentially an ideal country, side note, I assume this isn't related to the other ideal country thing, but you know, where no one suffers, is accepting that there is one young child who is forced to live in misery for the sake of others. But for David, he likely was the child, suffering in silence to inspire others into living the better lives. So people walking away from Omelas, for him, means abandoning him and his speeches. But there's an interesting interpretation that arises when you combine it with to be or not to be, let's decide democratically. Since David's life revolves around his speeches, he's an ultimate after all, people deciding to walk away from Omelas in this case will destroy him. Before he was suffering for them, but now his suffering is meaningless, so he might as well die. When his manipulative side was revealed and people abandoned hope on him, it was democratically chosen his life as he knew it will end. This is sort of what gets me to think David's purpose in life, his lemon, were his motivational speeches. They gave his painful life meaning. But how and why did he choose that path if he didn't believe people could change? It's unlikely he did it exclusively for money, seeing as he dislikes expensive things, so what was he looking for? You see, I think he was looking to prove himself wrong in a way. Although he believes people can change, he desperately wants to believe they can. After all, he hates himself, so he'd really like to be able to believe he could become better. Maybe by getting others to better themselves, if he just pretended to be a good person for long enough, he could actually become a good person. Fake it till you make it, basically. Add that to the list of reasons why he likes Xander. The ultimate rebel represents the change David wants to believe is possible. And that's why he comforted Ara in the playground, I believe. You could argue maybe he was just manipulating her, but you can't fake a blush like that, especially when there's no need to since no one's looking at his face. The things he tells Ara, that the world is kinder than she believes and that she can still be good even after all she's done, are things he wants to believe himself. Cue why he breaks down so bad when he realizes Ari was genuinely trying to follow his advice and trying to better herself, and in doing so she followed a note straight to her death. Or she got so disillusioned when David told her his real belief that she hung herself if David believes that's what happened. Believing his speeches only causes harm because they're not founded in reality in his eyes, and that reveals the lie of his evil persona. Yeah, I can finally say with confidence what he's actually lying about. Only took me like an hour and a half. See, the things he says about people not changing, he does believe. It's how he feels about them that he's lying about. He doesn't take joy in telling people that lazy, useless and stupid people will stay that way until they die because he considers himself lazy, see, not wanting to get out of bed and usually arriving late to meals, and useless, see, his speeches just get people killed. Not stupid though, keep in mind he actually considers himself smarter than average for seeing the reality of the world. He's self-loathing and arrogant, yes, it's confusing. But hold on, didn't I say he enjoyed acting like a dick and that was the whole point of the lemon bomb? Well, yes, but what he enjoys is the catharsis of letting it all out and insulting everyone. He doesn't actually enjoy believing the things he believes. And he's also probably pretending to enjoy it a lot more than he actually is. He's probably not very happy calling Abbey a temporary weather spell. Yeah, this guy's a clusterfuck. So that's how I actually interpret David's relationship with his talent and his evil persona. And there is actually a chance this Omelas thing isn't related, but I didn't know where else to put this, so here it goes. Anyways, numeral 13 shows up here. Unlucky number 13 naturally goes to Teruko, in the word or, but probably more for to be or not to be. You know, the most famous line from that character that David's constantly getting related back to? The character's foiling again. Anyways, aside from that, Teruko being related to this line alludes to her already implied suicidal tendencies. In particular, the entire speech does actually fit her shockingly well, seeing as Hamlet comes to the conclusion that life is full of suffering and the only reason people don't commit suicide is because they're scared of what comes in the afterlife. Sorry to any literature majors which just heard me horrendously oversimplify one of the most culturally significant pieces of literature ever. The point is, that horribly pessimistic outlook is similar to how resigned Teruko is with her luck and her fate, and therefore is also similar to how David feels about the world. Teruko thinks it won't change because her luck will always make everything terrible, and David because he doesn't think people can change. This is one of the main ways in which they foil. But the placement of the numeral may be significant as well. It's not on the whole phrase, technically speaking, just or. You could see that as her being indecisive on the whole life is worth it, life is not debacle, or more darkly, see it as her phrase being or not to be, meaning either she wants to be dead or David believes she should be. She is very similar to him, or at the very least, the exceedingly distrustful person she presents herself as is very similar to how David sees himself. Yeah, bear with me, we're dealing with multiple layers of psychological issues here. And if David considers himself awful, then he naturally hates Teruko as well. And then there's the background text. Again, the soliloquy doesn't add much, but the passages on or do. Let's start with the bottom. The Omelas text I spoke about before. One way to read this is that Teruko being the suffering child because of her luck, but the issue with that is that, by her own admission, her luck also affects those around her. The other is that it's simply a reference to class trials, since one person must suffer so the rest get to live, and that fits the rest of the scene's context well enough. Seeing as she's the protagonist, it does fit. And then there's the more conspiratorial ideas, like the idea that the killing game was set up to contain Teruko's luck, and so she and the rest are suffering for the rest of society. That's a bit out there, but a more grounded idea, which I could actually see working, is that it's related to whatever reason Xander had for trying to kill Teruko. She must suffer so the rest do not. And it's possible David's picked up on this idea, and now also believes Teruko should die. I've never been a fan of the idea that David was the one who asked Xander to kill Teruko, because why send a note when you can just talk to the guy? But him seeing what Xander was doing and chasing after his goal, I could see it. And then there's the text to the side, a quote from Murder on Orient Express. It's talking about a man who seems benevolent, but his eyes say otherwise. When he looks at the protagonist Poirot, the detective feels a strange malevolence coming from the other. The reading on this changes depending on who you assume Poirot to be, but I believe it's meant to be Teruko, who saw through the seemingly benevolent David ever since they first met. The malevolence that man seems to hold for Poirot fits David, as he does kinda hate Teruko quite a bit, and in particular, at this point in the series, David specifically hates Teruko's detective abilities, as she's going against his manipulative attempts to get everyone to vote for him. This is why I waited until now to explain this quote. I don't think it makes too much sense without the context of Teruko. Moving on now, next to the Who Knows is an excerpt from Murder on Orient Express again, where Poirot claims to be starting to solve the case. This is related to class trials and solving their mysteries, since as I mentioned before, that is the second way to read the scene. The French means something like "it's funny" all that, which doesn't mean anything for us, but I'm pointing it out so you don't have to go translate it yourself. But is simply accompanied by its definition. Let's decide doesn't have anything, and then this thing flashes on screen. What is the most important thing? Over a bunch of seemingly incomplete words. Probably you will need to fill out the question marks with letters to make sense, then see what word you get on the vertical. The best answer I've seen for this is Venus's Thinking's Resolve, though it has the unfortunate consequence of having to assume feces instead of faces or even faces, and the fact it doesn't have much to do with the context. However, if that really is the way you solved it, that kinda has to be the answer. There's not a lot of words that really work. The other possibility is that you're meant to simply fill out the words, then like look for them in the MB and do something, maybe something with Xander being referred to as something important. Yeah, no clue. Resolve is absolutely the best we have, and it's good enough. Now, finally getting to the democratic scene, deciding who lives and dies democratically is obviously connected to class trials, reinforced by the text in the background being the rules for one. Black and vote for participant, you know the deal. Which, by the way, is one of the biggest reasons color theory doesn't work on background. Since RA sort of has to be dark blue for the rest of the background text, the soft blue will be Shay, and yeah, either this implies she's the chapter 2 killer, or victim depending on who you ask, or straight up the mastermind. But both of those are weird things to reveal like this, so it's safer to assume background color theory simply doesn't apply. But then again, it wouldn't be the first time Shay looks suspicious in mastermind terms, so... This whole thing with class trials can be very easily related to the numeral on screen. What numeral, you ask? Well, if you look closely next to the X, a footnote in pink. 10. X is the Roman numeral for 10. It's telling us this is numeral 10, means numeral. And yes, this is one of the two numerals I mentioned earlier were stylized aside from mice. The number was obviously chosen to make the X, but it also coincides with a perfect grade in some systems, as well as being related to perfection in general, which is entirely factually accurate. Mean is perfect. But really she just gets this numeral because she was the black end of the first trial, who was democratically chosen to be no more. The hands which flash on screen during this scene possibly represent her struggle for survival, explicitly represented by footnote 6, prayer. Wait, you didn't see footnote 6? Come on, it's right there! I fucking hate this MB. It's important to note, even if the praying is related to Min, the hands aren't literally hers or else she'd be on the cast list. More on that later. Apart from that, footnote 17 tells us not a real word can't be found in any dictionary. Because, well, democratically, or just ly, isn't a word. You're looking for democratically. This misspelling, not in the original MB, could be connected back to Min's execution, where she was forced to make mistakes on a test and was punished for them. But this could also be read as David claiming there's no such thing as a democratic vote in this killing game. And there's a few ways to read that. Either he's saying they get no choice but to vote for one particular person, since Manu TV is forcing them, or because the group's ability to vote democratically is impaired. Either by their own idiocy, as David has pointed out, they're too quick to jump to conclusions, or, the interpretation I think makes the most sense, because David is manipulating them all to vote a certain way, so it's not a true democracy. Before we continue, do you remember the Tetraphobia thing? Yeah, Veronica's 14 turns into 10, and thus this is the numeral she gets via Tetraphobia. You know, the numeral in the one scene that talks about class trials? Apart from making her look like the mastermind, which is just par for the course with Veronica, it could simply be she enjoys class trials, which isn't exactly news. In any case, the vote is cast in the next screen, and it's unanimous for one person in particular, so this isn't a means vote. This one is so unanimous in fact, even the dead people voted. How else would you get 16? Footnote 12 attached to the tallying votes title reads majority rule is known as the fairest method of making decisions for a group. That's why murderers never complained when we voted for them to die. Another reference to the class trial. Because the vote is impossible, again even the dead voted, it's likely meant to be everyone voting for David. And because the footnote talks about murderers, it sort of implies David blames himself for Ari's death in some way, possibly because he believes she committed suicide after being disillusioned by David's true beliefs. But why does he believe that? Isn't Teruko debunking that idea with facts and logic? Well, yeah, but David thinks she's an idiot. Remember the arrogance? If he thinks Ari committed suicide because of him, then it must be so, there is no other explanation. That's why I think it's possible. The other possibility is that he considers himself a murderer but not the blackened. As in, it was his speech that caused Ari to trust the note, and because she died because of it, he's at fault for her death. Thus, he's not the blackened, but he still wants to die and drag everyone with him while he's at it, especially seeing the next part. It states the result are that everyone will die, even the blackened if it's not David, because there is no victory in a killing game. So perhaps they voted wrong when they voted David. However, I actually do think David considers himself the blackened, so this is more looking at the future. He stated that he thinks everyone will die in the killing game, so eventually it will happen regardless of the outcome of the second trial. Something like that. With a laugh, David takes off the hair clips and drops a facade as we saw him do in episode 11. David tells you to cry and make noise and whatever because he'll always receive great applause anyways. No matter how much he lied, before his secret came out everyone believed in him. Then when he tells you to sing a degraded copy, Certainly the Song, which by the way, Certainly the Song is part of the original lyrics, I believe that means he's telling you to say the things he's saying now, so repeat what I say. The same way that Who and Xander and other people like that likely repeated things he said in his inspirational speeches, now he's trying to get them to repeat the things in this song, manipulate them into believing what he believes. You know, the world won't change, all that stuff. Sort of like, since you always uploaded and believed that bullshit I was spewing before, you might as well repeat what I'm saying in this song. If you do it, we might even live in peace. Lie. I think? Footnote 9, which says, no respect for the classics SMH. Is there, but it doesn't really help the interpretation because it feels more like a joke. The song is self-deprecating in this line, so maybe the MB is just calling it out. Like, LCI is a classic, not a degraded copy. I agree, by the way, songs of anger. What my interpretation does fit is the background text. It's an excerpt from The Art of War of all things, which talks about something Sun Tzu calls the moral law. It's apparently some sort of unity of purpose, the idea that if the followers and the rulers have the same interests, their side will have an advantage in war. So again, repeat after me and we'll live in peace, maybe? There are other readings of the lyric, but it's this background text which makes me believe my interpretation. The number 7 numeral there is Shay's, in Do It Like That, Let's Live Together. 7's an interesting one because it's a lucky number and as stated in footnote 7, which will show up later, but that really doesn't have much to do with Shay. I guess they've had to give it to someone, so it could be insignificant. What's even weirder though is the quote itself. What does this mean? Like, this really makes her sound like the mastermind telling everyone to live together. And I guess it isn't off-brand at this point, but come on, there's gotta be something else. Well, I think the background text does help again. Remember, it's about leaders and followers having the same goals or something like that, so it's possible this is related to Mariabella, with Mariabella being the leader, and she's the one telling Shay to follow her examples, sing a degraded copy and do it like that to live together. Obviously, Shay doesn't want to be anything like her mother, but she's being told to be like that, I guess. Sort of. And maybe that's the meaning behind the numeral being 7, it's ironic. Being the daughter of someone like Mariabella will be considered by many to be extremely good luck, and so she should do whatever she says, regardless of how she feels about it. According to those people, not to me. Maybe that's the best I got, so we're going with it. Let's quickly go over color theory. Cry for Nico makes sense. Make noise for Cheery David, which I guess is related to his speeches. Shout for Levi, sure this color isn't too important. Go mad for Veronica, already explained. The acclamation is for Inspirational David again, because he gets the acclamation for his speeches, and you can see that in the short quotes in the background. Great applause for Xander, who obviously loves David's speeches, and is actually one of the hands clapping. Oh yeah, the hands! This is important, pay attention. If you look closely, you can identify the hands by their accessories. This one on the bottom left has fingerless gloves, so it's Xander's. The ones on the left feature a glove on the left hand, which doesn't reach all the fingers but only a few, and nothing on the right hand. That's Ari with her bowling glove. And the ones on top have these little rings with things that look like claws. They're called plectra and are used to play the zither. You can actually see them if you pay close attention at whose design. So the people clapping are the ones most moved by David's speeches in the Killing Game. Back to color theory, the graded copy and footnote 9 are pink for wit, likely alluding to the fact he dyes his hair to look more like his mother. Thus he's a degraded copy of her. Also, the footnote is sassy enough to fit him. Like that is purple for Charles, I guess. Maybe given the context it's that Charles originally sang a similar tune to what David's doing now, all about not liking anyone else and pushing others away. Sure, why the hell not? And then leave in yellow for Cheery David, contrasting the earlier death, because back when he was pulling off his happier act, he was inspiring everyone to live. Let's continue. Oh, but before that, we just reached the halfway point of the MV, nice, so it's a good time to make a small correction. As a peek behind the curtain, the editing software I'm using for this, which I absolutely recommend if you want a free editing software, not an ad, doesn't exactly make it easy for me to add corrections to the audio, or maybe it's a skill issue on my part, but there's actually something I learned while making this related to the Goddess deadline. As pointed out by Siderest, on one of the frames which only has God on screen, do you see that? Yup, an arrow pointing at my portrait. Holy shit, this MB. So yeah, in case you are still hesitant about who the god is, here it is. It's Mai. Mai is dead apparently. I swear to my god there better not be any other small arrows in the middle of nowhere, I'm gonna lose it. More than I've already lost it anyways. Alright, this scene. Let's start with lyrics. As we know, David doesn't think anyone can change and concludes we should act big, which means proud given the actual words used in the song, with an original style, laughing about having killed so many. The text to the side in the last part is from, you guessed it, Ham Macbeth, where Macbeth claims he's killed so many people, it's just as easy for him to continue than to stop. Since the last line was talking about David's speeches, I believe David is talking to himself when he says you've killed so many, reflecting how many people he's hurt, but it's easier for him to continue manipulating and hurting others rather than stopping. Of course it is, people won't change, that includes him. So he pretends it's hilarious and he doesn't actually care about it. Hell, he's acting proud of it. The original style refers to a change in attitude, where before he regretted lying and manipulating, saw himself as a monster, he now decides to act proud of the damage he's done. That's what he's doing in the trial, and this is why it's around this scene when he lets loose the bad hair in the MB. And with this context, I think it's finally time I address something, which is, what the hell was David trying to do by getting everyone to reveal their secrets? What's been implied is that David wanted to breed distrust and create an atmosphere which will cause a murder to happen in an attempt to hide his secret. I believe this is true, and it's this lyric in particular when related to Macbeth's line that makes me believe that. David doesn't actually like what he's doing, manipulating people for a murder to happen, but he's stepped in blood so far that at this point letting his secret be revealed is pretty much a death sentence on him. But he's already hurt a lot of people by lying, so for him, getting a murder to happen to keep his career is just one more crime in a long list of crimes he's already committed. I'm not sure if that makes too much sense, but I'm calling it good enough. Now, the other stuff. We're shown an alphabet which... Oh, come on, David, you fucked up the alphabet! Look at the end there, it's all wonky. It's supposed to be WXYC, not WUX. What are you doing, you silly goober? Anyways, AA is colored red, which I don't think means anything, but seeing as we've already gone off the deep end, we might as well just say this is Xander or Mai because they're the beginning of the Killing Game somehow, and this is the beginning of the alphabet. Sure. We're already acquainted with black you, orange that guy, green this guy, and grey whoever else, but now we have one change in red. Since this is talking about how people can change, which doesn't really fit neither Xander nor Mai, this is probably for Veronica. It feels well enough with the secret quote on her page, the one about people breaking I talked about before. You've killed so many in red, frankly, I don't know. I assume Veronica because it sounds kinda mastermindy and with the context of laughing about death, definitively fits her vibe. I doubt she's actually killed anyone, for now, but still. And let's laugh in cyan for obvious reasons, it's Mono TV, it laughs about death. But yeah, we gotta address this, the original style frame. The yellow text in the background is a definition of transformative work, which the attached footnote 3 states it's from Title 17 of the United States Code, probably related to the original style, implying David is transforming in some way, which as we've discussed is him acting like an asshole to separate himself from his feelings about the people he's hurt. The text in blue at the bottom is from And Then There Were None, describing how everyone acted polite during breakfast even though they were all privately worried about who was going to die next. Since it's about hiding feelings, it's sorta related to the rest of the scene, I guess. And VIII, which means proud remember, is in dark blue for Arya or Shay, which does fit both the characters, maybe Arya a bit better, but yeah, we gotta talk about the elephant in the room, which is the clusterfuck that is original for color theory. This thing has 8 different colors, one for each letter, and we gotta explain it somehow. First explanation, Occam's razor, this is just the way it was in the original LGI and the dev took it. The original LGI has the word in similar colors, and even though it has less since the Japanese word is shorter, it's still the same idea. However, you'll notice LGI uses yellow twice, which the David MB doesn't, and more pressingly, the David MB has been known to change the colors of certain works to fit color theory better. It's part of why the theory is so believable in the first place. If the dev didn't want us to apply color theory on this clusterfuck, they would have just colored it differently. Another explanation comes from the recent Q&A, where it was stated Veronica's favorite color is white with other colors, the freak, so maybe it's just all the colors. The issue there is that the Q&A came after the MB and there was no guarantee anyone will ask for favorite colors, so it's unlikely to be related. So what I think is the best idea is that all the characters got the word. You could try to fit their talents in, but I think it makes more sense to relate them to the meaning of original style under my interpretation, where original style means a change of heart. Charles, David, Xander when he's at Teruko, Arya if she's dark blue, Teruko if you think she's green, Ace if he's orange, all have already had a change of heart of sorts. Veronica, who likely represents the red, Who if she's green, Shay if she's dark blue, and Wit all could have a change of heart in the near future. The seeds are definitely planted for it. And this interpretation is great and works fantastically, except for Mono TV, because how would it have a change of heart? It's an AI. It's not unheard of for fan and mascots to change sides, I guess, but I don't think that will be the case with Mono TV, at least not from what we've seen. And this inconsistency opens the door to more outlandish answers. For one, you know how the background text is talking about transformative works and essentially a killing game? Well, DRDT is a transformative work based on a killing game, so it works. But what if it means something in-universe? Could there have been an original killing game before the one we see in the series? Well, there's the THH one, but there's also the one in the first scene before the prologue. See, many believe that Xander's speaking, since apparently they got attacked in the face with a fork, which fits his eye wound. And presumably Xander speaks of a killing game, but we know it's a different one, a previous killing game, before the one we see in the series, since Xander was already missing his eye when that started. So, is it possible these characters color-coded into original are people who survived the original killing game, and Mono TV who was likely there too? The issue here is that you have to assume Teruko is green since she was likely there, but whatever, it can work. The other issue is that it's completely fucking insane, which is why I don't really believe it even if I came up with a theory. There is another way for these characters to be related to the origin of the killing game though, and that is if they were involved in Mai's apparent death, which does seem related, can't get into now. We'll see later there's an argument for Xander to be blamed, we know via Tetraphobia Wit may have been involved, and the second anniversary art really makes it look like Teruko was involved, so this could work after accounting for the other characters. Mono TV is a bit of an outlier there, but it could still work if you squint. Regardless, I still think the simplest answer is the change of heart idea, but I'm open to other interpretations, this thing really is crazy. The lyrics here aren't too difficult to figure out, minus of a little translation thing. You see how the MB says if something is important it will break and disappear? Well, as I pointed out before, the video I'm taking screenshots from the original LGI does also say it will break and disappear, but Xander seems post on the vocal wiki agree it should be it has broken and disappeared, which I do think is a more accurate translation. This isn't really important, but I just want you to have a taste of how crazy I went researching this. Anyways, the point remains the same. David is a relentless pessimist, so anything he considers important he believes will undoubtedly disappear, like Xander. He tells you to go and cry about that reality when the original lyric is actually let's cry, while also saying you're in his way for one reason or another, so move. He's just being needlessly mean because he's struggling to cope with Xander's death is what I get from this. Thankfully the line with Xander is pretty straightforward. No footnotes, no numerals, no colors, and the Xander doesn't have an eye patch and we have to talk about it. Fuck! Okay, so here's a theory. Since Xander doesn't have an eye patch on this scene, this is presumably a memory from the student's time at Hope's Peak, which when combined with things like the Mae being in a portrait in the background, could imply David actually kept some of his memories from his time there, or at the very least has some unexplained nostalgia towards people like Xander whom he was close to during Hope's Peak time. However, while it's a really cool theory, I don't quite think this is the case. For one, keep in mind the things in the MV aren't literally happening in David's head. After all, he wouldn't be able to know things like Teruko being the protagonist, so the comment section scene would be impossible. There's also things like Rose's disturbed thoughts and Teruko's suicidal tendencies, which David just shouldn't know in the Killing Game. So this video isn't meant to be taken so literally, at least in my opinion. I believe Xander is simply missing his eye patch in this scene to make it unambiguously clear he and David had a good relationship during Hope's Peak time as well. But still, this idea sparks some speculation on other areas. Like, for example, the possibility that David is the one speaking during the pre-chapter cutscenes. Take chapter 1. Half remembering is worse than forgetting, her name, his face. But the issue I have with that is that just fits Teruko better. We know Teruko doesn't remember Mai's name based on the chapter 1 episode 6 dream sequence, and the he could be her brother, Prosopagnosia and all that. Hell, it could also be Xander reminiscing on his family. I doubt he'd forget their names, but maybe during some particularly bad days, I don't know. Then the scene pre-chapter 2 is I still miss you so much that I wish you had never been part of my life. The worst part is even though you left me like this, there's nothing I can blame you for. I guess you could say this one doesn't work with Teruko, given there are things she can blame both Xander and Min for, though it could still be about Mai. But the more important thing here is, well, there's nothing here talking about Hope's Peak time, so even if it was David, he could still be saying this based only on his memories of the Killing Game. Though, like I said, maybe he doesn't fully remember anything. Maybe it's more of a nostalgic feeling or something like that. It would explain why David latched onto Xander so quickly when usually he's more guarded. That one is a bit more solid, but well, it could also just be Danganronpa syndrome, where characters get extremely attached extremely quickly, so you can have them form meaningful relationships even with a story that only spans like 2 weeks. That's why I don't consider it particularly strong evidence. Especially because in my eyes, it's definitely not enough to offset the issue that David doesn't seem to recognize Xander during his introduction. At all. He even explicitly says I don't believe we met before, and he calls Xander Sir. There was no indication at this point that they'd be missing memory, so David has no reason to pretend he doesn't know who Xander is. If he had a vague feeling of nostalgia, wouldn't he at least wonder if they'd ever met before? Like, ask a question? So yeah, it's a really cool theory and I think it's an interesting idea, but I don't consider it very likely. You can still believe it if you want, obviously. Okay, back to this. Numeral 16 in Go and Cry is for Who, and numeral 12 in But You're in My Way, Aren't You is for Eden. I believe Eden may have gotten number 12 since it's a relatively significant number for times and clocks. Clocks are divided in 12 since each day is divided in 2 halves of 12 hours and each hour is divided in 5/5 of 12 minutes and each minute in 5/5 of 12 seconds and each year in 12 months. You get the idea. As for Who and her numeral, while I couldn't find anything linking her to 16 itself, I think it's worth noting she's the highest number and thus the one most separated from Xander's numeral 1. Now, hear me out, it's possible this was done to highlight how different the two are in David's eyes. While Xander was willing to look past David's career and see him as an equal, as human, Who never really did stop idolizing him, not until he fully dropped the act. Hell, she even still trusted him after his testimony. Then, Xander is the type of relentlessly energetic force David wishes he could be, while the calmer demeanor Who takes while attempting to always hold the moral high ground, hits a bit too close for home to David. But the most important thing is that while Xander is someone driven on his own, who fiercely chases his dreams and ideals without outside influence, who, assuming she has the hopeless child secret, is lost on her own. She only finds purpose in trying to help others, otherwise she feels worthless. To make it more explicit, while Xander is the polar opposite of how David sees himself, who is almost like a mirror to him, and there's nothing David hates more than himself. Or maybe he's just sexist, I don't know. Anyways, it's this hatred for Who that originally made me think David must be the triple question mark person telling her to go cry. However, there's a bit of an issue with that, which is, why the triple question marks? I mean, David speaking is the default, not something you need question marks to clarify. Now, to be clear, the original LCI does have question marks around this area, but only on the Eden line, not whose. And even then, if they're really David and thus redundant, wouldn't it make more sense to cut them out? So, here's what I think. I think this is a different character, but who? Who will say these things to the sweetest characters in the Killing Game? Ace maybe, but he feels a bit odd to throw in here, like why does he get a gimmick like this? Going by importance, say Mai, Xander, doesn't really fit their personalities though. Now, I think this triple question mark person might be Teruko. She, like David, puts a front meaner than she actually is. I could see her saying stuff like this. Like, who's lamenting about how sad it is that David betrayed them all, and then Teruko's like, well, if something's important, it'll break and disappear like Xander, go and cry about it. But the main reason I say Teruko is because it explains the Eden thing better than anyone else. Teruko wants to stay by herself and trust no one, but Eden gets in her way by being extremely nice and drawing her into social situations anyways. Is this perfect? I don't think so, but it's the best answer I can give. At least until the world can accept the true answer, that this is Blue Baby from the Binding of Ice. Look! Urgently! I am looking, David, I've been looking at your damn MB for several weeks now. Just like that, since I am for Mono TV because, I don't know, it orders people around. With the monocoins it gave Teruko, it can literally make people move aside, so it works. Finally, and disappear in red for either Xander or Mai, you know the drill, dead and most likely dead. Okay, so the good news is that most of the passages from that part at the beginning are just the openings to various texts already referenced, so there's no actual meaning to them. In order, we see No Longer Human, Hamlet, Lemon, Murder on Orient Express, The Little Prince, some sort of scientific paper on the Shoemaker Levine Comet, don't worry, we'll get there, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and Utopia. You may also hear some looped lyrics, unique to the Yoppei cover, which are actually Japanese. Anderson, because my ass does not know Japanese, identified the lyrics as Watashi wa inu desu, which translates to I am a dog? Wait, what? Wait, is that why that thing happened at the beginning? I mean, it's not wahai, but still. What am I supposed to do with this? Tell you Mono TV and David the ship is gonna be canon? I got nothing, for now. After that, there's just a bit of stalling for the lyrics to come back, including Note to Self, put something here, this MB's answer to the original's blank space. And then this thing, the correct-incorrect code where footnote 13 is. This thing has been solved, but the devs don't really want us to give out the image or the answer, so while I will give you hints to solve it, I won't give out the actual answer, or show the image. So this thing is related to a QR code you may have noticed on some of the books there. By piecing it together and scanning it, it takes you here, a Tumblr page with the infamous URL Tally5. All that's visible is a text box, and the option to put something in it alongside the text was I correct. And that is what connects it to the correct-incorrect code. And so now I shall give you hints so you can piece together the answer, like Anderson did when she became the first person to ever solve the code to my knowledge, the freaking Kirigirikini. In the spirit of the thing, I'll give you hints in 5 stages, in case you want to do it with the least help possible. I mean, that's silly, you probably should just listen to all the hints first, but I'm doing this to be cutesy, okay? Okay, here's the first hint. By diving into the code of the website, Final Cigar was able to find out what the code actually does, and thus they got an idea of what it would have to look like to work. I am dumb, but as I understand, what you put in the box gets put into the URL to fill out a Tumblr image URL. That means it's a completely nonsensical series of characters, so don't look for a word. In particular, it will have to be 40 hex code characters, which means any digit from 0 to 9 and any letter from A to F, so A, B, C, D, E, F. You solve it yet? Probably not, so here's hint stage 2. This one is about footnote 13, this Chinese symbol. It means something along the lines of correct or sha, so it seems like another way of saying correct, right? Except the symbol serves another purpose. It's actually a way to tally things in sequences of 5, like the 4 lines that went across you're probably familiar with. That's also connected to the tally 5 URL, obviously. Still nothing? Okay, hint stage 3. Some of the characters are not what they appear. In other words, some of those L's, they're actually ones. Here is the code again in a more readable font. You probably want more hints, yeah? Let's go to hint stage 4. You have to group the characters in a certain way. When you do this, pay attention to the line breaks, they're important, but don't worry about the total number of characters, you'll be fine. Those are all the hints Andersim gave in her original post, but I'm gonna add one more because I myself wasn't able to figure it out until I heard this, because it's completely nonsensical and I will die mad. So anyways, hint stage 5. There is one character which you just have to completely ignore. I don't know why or what the reasoning is, but you just have to do it. If you group the characters the right way, you should be able to see the general area where shit gets wonky, but I'm not gonna tell you which character you have to ignore, you're gonna need to play around with it for a bit. And there's all the hints. I'm gonna be honest, there's a non-zero chance I gave you too much help, but I hope it's still worth trying out yourself. It really isn't that difficult, I promise. I won't give you the answer, but I've come as close as I can without just telling you what to do. Now, you probably want me to talk about the image, and I will, but I'll put that in a separate unlisted video so we can keep all discussion of the image there. Don't worry, I won't actually put the image in that video, nor the solution. You can access it via whatever footnote is on screen at the moment. Don't go there unless you've seen the image, there are spoilers obviously. And also the script there is actually written to be seen after you finish this video, so yeah, I guess wait until the end of this video to go there, otherwise a lot of the things I say aren't gonna make a lot of sense. So after all that, we go back to the lyrics. I actually don't really know what's happening here, so I'm gonna go with a cop-out answer. This is the point in the song where the character, in this case David, fully succumbs to their insanity. They call out to do mind exercises before starting to count for no apparent reason, then they realize they can't think straight for no matter what, and changing topic suddenly to ask for medicine, presumably for their mental health. And maybe that's why the Chopin cover has the singer claiming to be a dog with loop vocals. We've made the connection that the protagonist is meant to be more of a cat, so they're losing their sense of self, or something. Footnote 7 tells us 7 is considered an auspicious, lucky, number in many Western cultures. Let's just skip it. Sure, I guess. This is literally what happens in the video, as we go from numeral 6 to 8 to 9, skipping 7. And speaking of numerals, Arturo's number 6 is here with mind exercises 1, 2, 3, 4. What? I mean, as assertion, I guess he does exercise the mind quite a bit, but this still feels strange. I don't really have a good answer for this one, frankly, and footnote 7 doesn't really help, unless you want to count that since the footnote is talking about numerals and numeral 7 is chase, it's trying to connect the two somehow, except I have no idea why it's doing it like this. Yeah, I don't have much for this one. It doesn't help that color theory has its second largest clusterfuck here, that being the 1 in red, 2 in yellow, 3 in cyan and 4 in green. I have no idea what this could mean, honestly. It could be the number of trial when they're important, like Xander in 1, David in 2, Mono TV in 3, yeah, that doesn't work. I have nothing, so I'm just gonna go with a cop-out answer. It's just like this to give some extra color to this part of the MV, and it's not meant to mean much more than that. It's like this in the original LCA as well, if it helps, though the colors are noticeably different. Anyways, after that, we have numeral 8 for Nico. Even if I try to think, I don't know. This sort of fits them, I guess, for their actions in chapter 2. Whenever they're asked why they did what they did to Ace, well, they try to think, but they don't know. I don't know is also colored light blue, which combined with the numeral being on screen is what makes us give this color to Nico. Because no one fits the words cry, I don't know quite like them. Then, Luke, aside from that, give me the usual medicine, has 9 for Levi. What? Well, medicine is red, which could either be for Veronica taking medicine if the theory she was hospitalized for a while is true, or it could be for Xander or Mai, as in the medicine of society. Good. I still have no idea what this has to do with Levi. I guess it's possible he's one of the people who we'd mentioned were taking prescription medicine, but I have no idea why we're learning it like this. That said, what's interesting about this numeral is the text and image on the background. It's about that comment Shoemaker Levi 9 I mentioned earlier, and yes, I believe this is why Levi got numeral 9. I mean, style is Shoemaker, Levi, 9, it's literally perfect. So what's the deal with this comet? It was orbiting Jupiter in the 1900s, and scientists managed to figure out that based on its orbital pattern it will crash into Jupiter in the 90s, and when exactly it will crash. The graph in the background of the scene we're talking about shows this prediction. Science win, the thing did crash as expected, and it was the first extraterrestrial impact between objects we ever managed to see. Hooray! So how do we connect it back to Levi? Weighted Blanket, you know that guy who made the analysis that informed Lagoon Chaconfine, postulates that this could be indication Levi is the Chapter 2 Blackened, thus he's on his final orbit because he's about to get executed. Now this is definitely plausible. Levi is possibly the most popular guess for Chapter 2 culprit, and I myself consider him the likeliest candidate, apart from Eden because tape, but let's not bury the guy yet, there are other interpretations. For one, the scientific importance of Shoemaker Levi 9. See, this comet story lends credence to the theory, the space theory, that Jupiter acts as some sort of protector of the inner planets of the solar system. Sometimes an asteroid which would have otherwise hit one of the inner planets gets close to Jupiter, it gets pulled into its orbit and ends up crashing into it like Shoemaker Levi 9. And all it takes is looking at Levi's subtitle quote in his character profile to see the possible connection between him and Jupiter. He's a protective character, all that needs to be said. And he can also be self-sacrificial. Just like Jupiter gets hit by the asteroids it protects us from, Levi's arm was slashed after he tried to protect the cast from Mono TV. Hell, Shoemaker Levi 9 itself apparently left a bruise on Jupiter more visible than the red spot there, just like Levi got a scar from protecting the others. You could also extend the analogy to the comet, saying that since the comet is connected to Levi by name, Levi is protecting the others from Eden himself, which could be related back to his anger issues. Now, the most straightforward interpretation is still Weighted Blankets, and seeing the state of affairs, I wouldn't be surprised if Levi is actually the culprit, but alternatives do exist. The final part of this scene, after a small laugh, is this sheet of music that flashes on screen. Yoppei's cover also has the singer saying, "Come on piano," apparently, which, yeah, there's a piano after this. This sheet of music would have been hard to decipher if it weren't for footnote 16, which shows up alongside it. While it was originally intended to serve as a military march, today it is most commonly recognized for its association with circuses and tomfoolery. If you know your trivia, you know that's Entrance of the Gladiators. You know the one, the da-da-da-da-da-da. As the footnote states, it was originally a military march, but now it's used to introduce the clowns to the circus.
Come on, piano!
God, I love this MV. David's introduction plays right after we see the music used to introduce clowns. To be fair, the original LCI does sample Entrance of the Gladiators, and one of the times it does is right before this, so it's not completely original maybe, but it's still way more explicit in the David MV. What is new is actually the secondary delayed introduction. Obviously this refers to David having two introductions in a way, first during the prologue when we meet him while he was keeping up his speaker persona, and later during the second trial where he revealed a persona closer to his real personality, though again likely exaggerated. Oh right, I fucking hate this MV. You may have noticed I haven't talked about the background at all so far, and it's because I was waiting for this scene, since what it says gives us context for the things there. Let's keep this to the point. The black and white cat could simply be a reference to Mono TV, but seeing as we've drawn links between David and cats already, and the fact there's extra attention being brought to the fact it's sitting on the chair David's sitting on, I wouldn't be exactly surprised if it actually represents him. Keep in mind black and white together in DRDT represent horror and the tragedy in general, not just the mascot of killing games, so David is horrific, yeah, got it. Then the bullets, possibly a reference to truth bullets. The MB tells us there are 6 of them, and the book gives us a nice hint. You can't. William Aftoncore right there. Here are the bullets, as you can see there's only 5 of them. The 6th one could be theorized to be inside the gun if you're feeling like a completionist. Said gun is apparently real, but it's clear callback to Xander, seeing as it's referred to as not a prop gun. Now, you might wonder if this means all the characters are going to have an item which represents them somewhere in the background, but I don't quite think this is the case, since you'd have to stretch real hard to get Arturo and Ace, for example. I'll still call it that when it may be possible though. So the dresser, you could relate it to Levi, but I think it's more of a reference to David putting on different personas like they're different clothes, maybe. The candle next to the My Portrait could be connected to her, both because the flame could represent light in the darkness, love, even hope, and because candles are sometimes associated with visuals for protest, hint hint, or mourning, because this girl cannot dodge the dead allegations. The bowl of fruit represents vitality, and that's why Xander's gun is there, sure. You could also connect it to Rose because a few important paintings are of bowls of fruit. And the assassin's teapot, that one's weird. A teapot on its own could represent good relationships, like a tea party, but it's specifically called an assassin's teapot. I explained before what those are. Maybe it's just further hinting Mai is dead, as in assassinated. Maybe it's to highlight David's deceptive nature, or even Mai's deceptive nature if you speak nonsense and I am a full interpretation of the Hythlodeus line applies. Yeah, remember that one? Or maybe it's who, and it's to represent David was lying to her. The last one is what seems the most plausible to me, so sure. The yellow balloon with a smile can represent joy or even hope, so David obviously calls it a stupid kid's toy. Everything that's joyful and nice is clearly stupid and naive and childish in his eyes. Hell, since it's a balloon, you could call it fragile, and if something is nice and good, it will break and disappear. I've seen this related to it, but I don't quite see it, I see it more going to Eden. Though maybe Dario Eden, the clockmaker, should get the clock, but I actually think that's Xander again. You'll notice the fork in the face of the clock, when Xander may have been attacked with a fork in the face. This will be connected back to the idiom "a broken clock is still right twice a day", as David admitting even though Xander makes no sense usually, sometimes he brings up good ideas. The hand seemed to be pointed to 3:30 or 3:31, but I got no clue what that would mean. I even checked the date March 30, but no dice. The portrait full of enigma is a clear reference to class trials, not much to add there. You could relate it back to David wanting to get voted out if you want. There's also a pair of scissors over the My Portrait, which is never labeled for some reason. I frankly have no idea what this could mean, so I took to Tumblr and they came up with, well, what you can expect from Tumblr. As nice as MS eloquently put it, lesbians. Which probably true for Mai, but I thought we kinda knew that already. I will added that after that idea, it could be a representation of cutting the thread of someone's life, which again fits Mai and David kinda. And Chris Knight said that maybe they're fabric scissors, so they could point to Levi being the culprit since it's close to the portrait of Enigma. And on the topic of characters, scissors, stationery, with custom weapon, this guy really can't avoid being blamed for Mai's death, huh? Mai's portrait is labeled Portrait of Someone Dearly Loved, while Teruko's is labeled Portrait of Someone Dearly Unloved, flipped. This sort of establishes a connection between the two as opposites in some way. I could talk about how I think these two may be connected all day, but this video is way too long already, so I'll have to ask if you want to hear me rant about Mai for a while, read my post on Herald, link in whatever footnote is on screen. And speaking of that post, there's something I brought up there which I also have to bring up here. You remember when I said the final bullet could be inside the gun connected to Xander? Well, that gun is aimed suspiciously close to the My Portrait. Not exactly, but close enough. This, along with some stuff from the bonus episode, could imply Xander was the one who dragged Mai into whatever rebellion against Hope's Peak they had going on, and that's what got her killed. So Xander sees himself as being to blame for it. You know, survivor's guilt and all that. There's a chance it seems slightly wrong to convey David doesn't believe that himself, but I'm already reaching way too hard, so... The gavel, the skull, and the kitchen knife all references to the class trial for Xander's death. And, you know, at first my uncultured ass thought maybe the skull was related to the to be or not to be soliloquy, but turns out that's a completely different scene apparently. The skull in Hamlet has to do with a poor Yorick I knew him well scene, which I guess you could connect to Xander, like David saying he knew Xander well and that Xander gave him joy, like Yorick the Jester gave Hamlet joy. And the point of the scene is Hamlet contemplating on the fragility of human life, which sort of fits. I'm not sure this all works, considering David really didn't know Xander well at all, but I guess it's there. It's probably just a skull to represent death though. Besides that, kitchen knife may be mean if you really squint, but the general reference to Xander's trial could count as her reference anyways. Reflection is due in the mirror, as in David has no reflection. Now what I get from this is that David's a vampire, but it's presumably another dig at his non-humanity. A comfortable looking chair. Maybe I'm going insane from reading too much, yet I can't help but notice the chair is comfortable looking, not straight up comfortable. Perhaps that's to say David looks comfortable, but when he's faking being happy in his cheerier persona, and when he's pretending to be a completely remorseless asshole in his more evil persona, but he really isn't. I don't know, this was here in the original LCI as well, so take it with a grain of salt. A gas mask, you could connect that to Charles. Notably, it specifically stated it's unused, while the theater mask to the side has no such clarification. I guess if you take into account that a gas mask is technically something to protect one's life and David wants to die, then of course it's unused. Yeah, that's insane even for my standard. The theater mask, as stated, was likely used, split down the middle black and white for comedy and tragedy. Likely representative of David's two personas again, which is why I wasn't too worried about assigning him the cat earlier, since he's gonna be related to the monocolor scheme anyways. It's worth noting though that even though they're his personas, they're both still masks, they're both lies. And funnily enough, since it's a theater mask, if you're gonna give it to anyone else, you will have to give it to Shay, who keeps tripping into mastermind allegations, or if you really squint, Veronica, who trips on mastermind allegations for fun. The rope is straight up seen only as materials for a noose, if you were wondering how stable David's mental state is at the moment, possibly connected to Ari for obvious reasons. The safe with unknown contents likely represents the secrets David is keeping and/or the feelings he's bottling up, which includes whatever the end of his conversation with Ari was, if you were wondering why the rope was around it. The disembodied arm of a mannequin, if I'm honest I have zero clue why that's there. An albino mouse and a plant named Arabidopsis are paired together, alongside footnote 2. Other examples include Drosophila melanogaster and E. coli. These are all used in science as model organisms, which are similar enough to other organisms that result of experiments conducted on them can generally be extrapolated to the others. So if an experiment is conducted on Arabidopsis, it being a model organism for plants, then the same results can be expected on other plants. E. coli is the equivalent for bacteria, the albino mouse is the famous lab rat, and in her voice actor reveal, Min describes how Drosophila melanogaster, the fruit fly, is a model organism for humans. This idea of a model organism is how David sees his own humanity. He sees himself as close to human but not quite. The mouse could additionally be tied to Nico or Min, since the footnote name drops the same fly she does in her voice actor reveal, and she has described the ultimate contest for eminent students as an experiment of some kind. The scattered hair clips are obviously for David, dropping his inspirational facade, and the lemon's already been explained. Dummies is specifically in plural, but there's only one wooden doll. That's because the other dummy is likely David, as he doesn't resemble a human. Obviously a TV, reference to the Killing Game probably. The snake represents lying, nothing new there. Serpent is a synonym, but it's a more poetic way of saying snake, so the clarification works in the context of literature gone insane. The suspicious stains are odd, why not just say it's blood, I don't know. Point is, it's just tetric imagery. Books of various kinds. If I have to explain to you why there's books in this MV, then something has gone clearly wrong. But the books are empty if you want to read into that. Take your pick and meaning. David's empty, David's soulless, David has no original thoughts, David has nothing more to say, etc. The terrorist iconography, I frankly have no idea what it is. I couldn't find the symbol anywhere, but I sorted out that I will put real-world terrorist iconography in the video anyways. I think it's meant to further connect the TV to the Killing Game, but I'm not sure. The megaphone is David's custom weapon, simple. Then the lions represent happiness, change and hope, so obviously David makes a point to call them a weed. Footnote 18's here, it reads author's note, sauce, controlled flowers, lol. Well, I happen to think those dandelions look quite lovely, thank you very much. I have frankly no idea what this means, I guess it really just is an author's note. The panels of letters are a reference to a non-canon comic that I've made of David receiving a lot of fan mail and not reading it at the suggestion of Wit. It shows the love he receives in his inspirational persona, a love he obviously doesn't reciprocate. You could connect this to Wit, I guess. The flowers of an unknown species are probably white camellias, just looking at them anyways, and as pointed out by Adjustable Site, they are likely the same flowers on my tattoo, and on the text boxes during bonus episodes. These flowers represent platonic adoration and respect, which fits, and are also popular funeral flowers in Japan. Yeah, she's dead. The Monokuma plushie is labeled a popular toy in contrast to the balloon being a stupid kid's toy, because David sees despair and bad things in general as more grounded and realistic than campy doesn't hope. The stoplight is interesting. It could be interpreted as another indication of David's suicidal ideation, another form of saying to be or not to be, to continue or to stop. The Ruka's portrait being nearby, considering where her numeral was, makes sense in this context, but both of the options are lit up as David's questioning it, and that's why the question marks are there. However, it could also be a callback to the one scene we have of Mai in the main series, where she's standing near a crosswalk, the question marks just being for her mysteriousness. Or they're trying to tell us who the triple question mark person who shows up in the lyrics is, because while the original LCI has question marks, it doesn't have triple question marks. Remember how I said that I thought this person was Teruko? Well, I think this is trying to tell us that. There's two people in that crosswalk scene, Mai associated with red and so possibly the stoplight, and Teruko looking at her, possibly the green little guy. And since the question marks are pointed at the green little guy, then Teruko is triple question marks. Maybe? Sure, let's go with it. Then, etc. I find it funny that this sort of refers to the scissors and only the scissors, unless you count the books and the other bullets, as well as the stars on the table to our left. Even David was labeled with the plural dummies thing. Finally, the cast list. I brought it up before, but as stated, the text to the side clarifies these 7 are the only people who appear. David and Xander are obvious, Mai and Teruko have their portraits, which by the way means that just having your face shown isn't enough for Meika status, though it's worth noting Mai's name is crossed out, but probably just because she's mysterious and spooky. Unless you want to count that as further indication of her death, or just that David doesn't remember her in the killing game. Hu and Ari are also listed, and that's why the hands in the applause scene are so important. That's the only time those two show up, but it does clarify why they're on the cast list. I know for a few people instantly jumped to calling Hu the Chapter 2 killer just because there wasn't a clean connection between her array and the cast list otherwise. Finally, the last name, which everyone and their mothers have called out as Miss Naegi by now. Naishi doesn't work because you'd see the other I if you're wondering. Unless this Miss Naegi person is the ideal countrywoman, we've yet to see her, but we'll spot her in the next scene. Speaking of the next scene, the transition is lifted from LCI, don't worry about it. So here's the infamous footnote 5. As the translation has been intentionally botched in many parts, it should not be considered accurate. It's attached to translation needed because this part, in case you somehow didn't notice, isn't translated. Why the footnote is here is a good question, but it's likely just because it's the one scene in the MB explicitly linked with language, as opposed to the other cases which are more subtle. I checked to the best of my ability and these all look like the same kanji as the original video, so nothing's changed there. The lyric is apparently hard to translate, but it's something along the lines of "These pretentious revolutionaries, ridiculous, let's give them tickets of lead and make them write in blood a book of self-denial confessions. Let's do it." Now in the original LCI, this continues the story of Ayaka. After becoming disillusioned with the idea of revolution herself, she begins looking down on all the other revolutionaries who are just like she used to be. Those idiots, in her eyes, deserve to be probably metaphorically but maybe literally shot, because if you didn't catch it, tickets of lead are bullets. The Book of Self-Denial Confessions is the revolutionaries being coerced to go back on their ideals through force. To give you the first example I can think of, which isn't too politically charged, something like when Galileo was forced to absurd retract the claim that the Earth orbits around the Sun. This song is Ayaka's Book of Self-Denial Confessions, as she used to be one of these pretentious revolutionaries, but now she claims the world can't change, and even starts going against revolutionaries actively, as we see her do in Justified Genocide. You know, her Robosaur. This has very little to do with the David MB, but mind you, but I just wanted to talk about it because Literature Girl Insane has pretty good lore. In the context of the MB, the pretentious revolutionary is obviously Xander. You see his hand in the video holding a gun. What's important here is that even if this gun is real, Xander is still associated with ultimately harmless prop guns. The idea is that Xander saw himself as impactful and dangerous as a gun, but David never thought he'd achieve anything. But who is Xander rebelling against? The next frame has someone holding out what is presumably a HopeSpeak acceptance letter. Since we don't know of anyone with that ring, it's also safe to assume that this is the Miss Naegi the cast list alludes to, which makes sense, a descendant of Makoto being the headmaster of HopeSpeak or something along those lines would fit. But what's interesting here is that she's literally opposed to Xander in this scene. I've alluded to it before, but this is one of the most explicit references to the idea that Xander, and likely Mai, had some kind of revolution against HopeSpeak going on. And because of that, I believe the scene is actually trying to recontextualize the line. The one holding out the gun, the one who should be handing out the tickets of lead, is the revolutionary, while the hand that shows up when the tickets of lead are mentioned is the hand of the HopeSpeak representative. So David is perhaps saying that the one who should be shot is HopeSpeak in a way. Perhaps this is why the lyrics are untranslated, so the exact meaning remains somewhat ambiguous. Since the rest of the lyrics are often mistranslated, as stated by the footnote on screen, there's no way to actually tell what words would actually be used if these lyrics were in English. Maybe it will be made clear that it is not the revolutionaries getting shot but someone else. Is it a stretch? Absolutely, but I don't think David wants to shoot Xander, so I'm trying my best to make sure he doesn't say that. But what will this imply? Despite not seeing the point in his revolution, as he doesn't think the world can change, is David still cheering for Xander to succeed, metaphorically killing Hope's Peak? I believe so, yes. There's a chance David was involved in this Hope's Peak revolution in some way, but I'll have to get back to it later. So with the idea that, despite the revolution being pretentious, David still wants it to succeed, the rest of the line can be read as follows. Let's give Hope's Peak tickets of lead and make them write in blood a book of self-denial confessions, so it carries a way more revolutionary meaning here. The let's do it in yellow is David committing to the idea further, as it's stylized as a truth bullet because, well, we've already established we're shooting, right? Even if it's metaphorical. Does this reading work, or am I just writing fanfic at this point? I have no idea. Anyways, for the rest of color theory, revolutionary in red for, well, if you can't fill in the blank, I'm worried for you. Lead in gray for evil David could allude to his suicidal tendencies, I guess, it's sort of removed from context but it works. Ridiculous in red for Xander probably, same reasoning as all the idiot lines, it's sort of removed from context again, but you know. Book of Self-Denial Confessions might be important, it's red and given the context it probably has to be either Xander or Mai. It's a bit of an insane idea, because I don't know what else this will mean. May have gotten killed for going against Hope's Peak, and that in a way is Hope's Peak Book of Self-Denial Confessions. They claim to love their students and wish to nurture hope, and here they are, killing Mai, a clear contradiction to their ideals. A self-denial confession. Are there simpler, better answers? Probably, but I'm done thinking for the day. Anyways, thankfully the last part of color theory is easy, as it's blood in pink for wheat. Blood in pink for wheat, what the hell? My guy, you gotta at least try to dodge the allegations. There's red blood right there, why make this one pink? It doesn't help that I just said the line right after is about Mai's death. The most sensible answer is that this is just related to Wheat's mom or his general nonchalance when it comes to murder, as he hides his feelings. The tetraphobic answer is that this is once again alluding to the possibility that Wheat was somehow involved in Mai's death. Or he's just a mastermind, sure he wants to look like it so badly. Well, this scene was fun, hopefully the next one will also be relatively chill. So now it's we cry and make noise, huh David? This is one of the things which makes me think all the times it was translated to you were intentional. Remember that this is after David declares himself a revolutionary alongside Xander, so now he is crying and making noise and going mad as well. This is one of the reasons I believe the previous scene was recontextualized as well. Admittedly, there's a chance I'm reading too much into this and that I didn't even think about it, but that may be enough trust, usually speaking. Anyways, make no mistake, even though David has joined in on making noise and stuff, he still doesn't think the world can change. The quote in white at the top is from the one who walk away from Omelas, and it states that when children learn of the truth of the city, their tears dry quickly and they accept the reality promptly, and alludes to David realizing the world won't change. The text to the side, Macbeth again, speaks of the futility of life because the days keep passing by until we all die. I hope you can figure out the connection to David by yourself now. The clown and self-delusion line is interesting, as I believe it's actually meant to be more of an insult. I'll get there in a moment, but it's gonna make more sense if we look at the next line, let's scoop down a cup of poison. You may jump to simplify the cup of poison line to just David being suicidal again, but the quote to the side, the beginning of Socrates' apology, recontextualizes. In it, Socrates speaks of his detractors and claims to be baffled at one of their claims, that he is a good orator, that he convinces people of his ideas just because he speaks good. He claims that if he ever convinced anyone of anything, it is only because he spoke the truth. Ultimately, Socrates is sentenced to death by drinking poison, that's where the lyric comes in, but here's the interesting part. Socrates apparently could have appealed for a different sentence, or something like that, please don't kill me historians, but he didn't. He said, words more, words less, if I have to speak like you fucking idiots, I'd rather just die. Or rather, that's what's important for us. There was a bit more to that, where he actually considers killing him is the lesser evil or something like that, but it's not what we're referencing. Essentially, Socrates decided that if the world couldn't accept his truth, then he'd rather not live in it. David and Nayaka, since the apology is also referenced in the original, are saying they'd rather die than engage in the delusion of the masses. That's why I believe the other line is supposed to be an ironic insult. You're the delusional clown for believing the world can change, so when Ayaka and David say let us delude, they're saying it ironically. Like, yeah, sure, let's be delusional and claim the world can't change, yeah, I'd rather drink poison. I think that's the idea of the lyrics themselves, but the David MB also adds a Hamlet quote for some extra contextualization. It's really hard to see, but it says the purpose of playing, as in acting in theater, is as to hold a mirror up to nature. This on its own means that theater can communicate messages about the reality of the world, but connected to the lyric, it has some interesting implications. It means that this act, this delusion of change, actually says something about David's nature. There is truth in his inspirational persona, which will be his delusion. Remember when I said David wants to be closer to his speaker persona and that he wants to believe his own speeches? This is part of what makes me believe that. And it doesn't have to be just about his inspirational persona. His evil persona is also an act, a delusion of some kind, but it still says something about David's nature, which is that he doesn't think people can change, all that stuff. Does that make sense? Okay, now color theory. Trying cyan for mono TV, frankly no idea, but it's kinda whiny, so it does work. We're also acquainted with Make Noise in Green for the True Core Who and Go Mad in Red for probably Veronica, Shout in Yellow for Speaker David, same idea as the from Suspicious Gaps. Then Change is purple for Charles, already explained, and World in Periwinkle, a color I fully believe Asterix made up on the spot because what is the mystery color of just one word? You know, I said Arturo in the beginning, but looking at it now, I actually think it's Rose. Look at the context. Accepting a horrible reality like the Amel's people fits with her accepting the reality of her situation with the Sperling Foundation, and the tomorrow line is vaguely similar to the sentiment in her hidden quote. In the end, the only thing I can do is watch my wretched life go on. This is her world, that is why that's the color reward. Sure, why not? Clown in Pink for Wit, yep, he's a jokester. Clown in Green for Who or Teruko, again David insulting them. Self-delusion in Red is a bit strange, but probably David calling Xander delusional for his revolutionary ideas, fits in context. And finally, Cup of Poison in Purple for Charles, and in fact this is the phrase that practically confirms this as his color, as he's the character most closely linked to Poison via his talent and his weapon being Strychnine. In the culmination of his building feelings of hopelessness, which he's been trying to suppress, David screams out about how pointless and painful and miserable the world and life in general is. In the background, a quote from Hamlet appears over his eyes in grey. It's a quote talking about how Hamlet should not be blamed for the damage he caused Laertes, because it was actually Hamlet's madness that did it, so Hamlet is also the victim. I believe that Laertes here represents Ari or Who or anyone else who was hurt by David's true beliefs, because to the others, when David speaks his truth, he looks like he's gone completely mad. But the idea here is that David isn't hurting them out of pure sadism, but because his true nature, his madness, not actual insanity, again just looks like it, simply hurts when it's revealed. To have the inspiring David tell you it's impossible to change and that the world will always be horrible is what hurt Ari and gang the most. Obviously, David's still an asshole, at fault for a ton of things and often insulting for shits and giggles, but nothing he says, be it that Ace is an asshole and who is easy to manipulate and everyone's an idiot or whatever else, will ever be as hurtful as the views he actually has in the world. And of course, David himself is also deeply hurt by his madness, his crazy ideas, because they are truly heinous outlooks on the world, which make him really sad, but he can't really control what he believes, so he too is a victim of this allegorical madness. Then there's the other line, which has possibly been mistranslated, so let me tell you what it originally means. The original says, with a kapu kapu, Clement laughed, being not defeated by the rain. Will you forget what you've done, I wonder? Right, if you're satisfied, then go and disappear. The first thing is a reference to the short story Yamanashi by Keiichi Miyazawa, the same guy that made the Undefeated by the Rain poem referenced right after. The Clamon is a fictional aquatic creature which has never been described or explained, so it's just a Clamon, that's all you get. And its laugh, for some ungodly reason, is represented by the onomatopoeia kapu kapu yo. Which, what does that even sound like? Okay, let me try. Yeah, we're not doing that. Anyways, the Clamon does two things in Yamanashi. It laughs, then it dies. And you'll notice the protagonist, being David or Ayaka, laughs shortly after. I believe they are sort of meant to be the Clamon who is laughing right before their death. Then what does Ayaka mean when she tells us to not be defeated by the rain? Isn't that too optimistic for her? Well, yes, that's why she laughs after saying it. I believe it's meant to be ironic, she's laughing as she tells us to remain undefeated by the rain. If Ayaka, who considers herself superior to the rest of humans, wasn't able to withstand the rain, the horrors of the world, the idea that anyone else could is hilarious to her. Right after she laughs maniacally, the screen flashes green and Ayaka's laugh trails off, which I feel represents a sort of sadness. She's entertained by the idea for a moment, but in doing so she's reminded of the rain, and so becomes saddened again. She asks if we'll forget what we've done, possibly gesturing at vaguely everything humanity's ever done. Right, of course we forget, so she gets mad and tells us to disappear. David does something similar up to the laugh, except it's a bit different. He claims himself to be undefeated by the rain, laughing arrogantly at how much better he's dealing with the killing game and the truth of the world than the others. But the little green screen with a fading laugh reveals the lie. He isn't undefeated by the rain, he's deeply hurt by everything going on. He just pretends not to be, but he's consumed by laughter. The symbols all around him during the laugh scene are actually just different ways people write laughs. Haha, you know, the W's are the way Japanese people write laugh, the green is flipped a bit, but it's the Korean version, you might recognize it from that one death portrait in STR-82, and the blue is the Mandarin symbol for laughter. It actually looks a bit more like this other symbol, but we don't talk about it because that one's not a laugh and it doesn't mean anything coherent for this. The coloring is important because there's a laugh in the lyrics, so technically speaking, all these laughs are subject to color theory. Red for Xander's death, yellow for David's lies, green for Who's disillusionment, dark blue for Arai's death as well. That's the rain which is defeating him. And yes, this is part of why I believe dark blue is Arai and green is Who. Given everything, I think having the applause crew be together in this scene makes the most sense. Also, since Azrax didn't count this in her original post, if you include this in color theory, then green appears 14 times, not 13, which removes one of the best arguments for it being Teruko. Or maybe I'm going insane. Then the thing afterwards, footnote 19, gives us context. This is a dialogue between two individuals which serves as a discussion of moral and philosophical issues, which I've seen possibly mentioned as a reference to Socratic dialogue, but I'm not entirely sure. Point is, two different characters speak here. Then the three question marks are present as someone says they're satisfied and will disappear, a possible intentional mistranslation, but one which also exists in the Colina video. The fact David disappears from the frame as the song says I'll disappear does make it look like he's the one saying that. So here's what I think is happening here. We've established triple question marks as Teruko, but here there are two characters being represented by them. One is Teruko, and given the disappear thing, the other is David. I believe Teruko asks David if he'll forget what he's done, and David replies that of course. The question marks stick around to clarify the lyrics make one full phrase instead of being unrelated ideas. Why is Teruko asking this? Well, David claims he forgot what he said to Arai in their final conversation, so Teruko is asking if he'll do it again, if he'll forget the damage he caused the cast by being an asshole in the trial. Well, I don't think David actually forgot what he did to Arai, and I don't think he'll forget the trial either. He lies about both and says yes, before claiming in the same breath that he's satisfied with the outcome, and so he'll disappear. But what disappears isn't David himself, believe it or not, it's his more evil persona. Essentially, after the trial, he won't have much use for the persona of an irredeemable monster he put on, so he'll retire it, and probably start acting closer to the way he actually feels. Maybe, I really don't know what's going on here, but as you've heard before, it's the best I have. Also, chapter 3 flashes on screen right after this, but I honestly don't think it's important. The original LCA says final chapter, so to keep the parallel going, they've put chapter 3 as a sort of teaser, I guess. Like, chapter 2 part 2 is longer, so it makes more sense to straight up have chapter 3. Does that make sense? Okay, color theory. It's interesting that the Foolish Thing breakdown starts with inspirational David's yellow on A and ends with the grey of his evil act with Thing, before screaming isn't it with the red probably belonging to Xander in this context, as if asking his deceased friend about the truth of life. This works to frame the entire breakdown as his descent into madness, capped off with a reminder of one of David's most recent heartbreaks. But maybe I'm going crazy, I'm seeing color theory in the fucking walls! Foolish in Cyan for Mono TV, sure it's kind of an idiot. Painful in pink, for fuck's sake, with recap foil theory better be true, or else the insane amount of times your color shows up in the weirdest places is going to leave me no choice but to call Masterman Cheese. Anyways, likely refer to his mother and his suppressed feelings. Miserable in yellow for David, yup. Pointless in mint for either Teruko or Who, an insult, nothing new there. Apart from the framing the breakdown idea, Thing being grey also relates to how David truly views, well, life, existence in general, whatever he's thinking. It's just a thing, it doesn't deserve a proper description. Kapu Kapu is again an onomatopoeia for a weird-ass laugh, so it's Cyan for Mono TV. Fungal mascots are known to laugh weird, right? Like Monokuma's Puhuhu, well, I guess he's not technically Fungan, but you get the idea. And listen, if you think I can actually assign the rating add to a specific character, Then you're right, it's Xander because part of the rain spoken about in the next line is his death, and I've already talked about the laugh. As David disappears, he leaves behind a throne of blood. As White the Blanket pointed out, not because he's dead, but because he's dropped his facade, he can't return to the comfortable looking chair of his inspirational persona now that everyone's seen him like this. The credits aren't too interesting, they're just the people who wrote the books mentioned, worked on the song or cover, stuff like that. I've mentioned Colina Wu as an interesting one before, but there isn't much else here. Thomas More's name is misspelled, I guess. Don shouldn't be capitalized like that, but you know. Also, why is Kagamine Len listed? If you wanna credit a Vocaloid, surely you'd credit Kagamine Rin, the one that actually sings the original LCI, right? This way this aside, at the bottom we see footnote 21, deriving from the Latin phrase etc., meaning and another similar things, and so forth, or and the rest of such things, abbreviated to etc, 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 and c or and c. What the fuck am I saying? Yep, that's what that means. Though I wonder why these credits even have this, like are there people not listed here? Why? Whatever, after the credits there's just... oh right. So Xander's numeral 1 flashes on screen, the final stylized numeral, alongside the phrase, the world of abnormal sentiment dances. By the way, dances here is a verb, as in we're not talking about a world with dances of abnormal sentiments, but rather the world of abnormal sentiments is dancing. So maybe Xander is the world here, like he has what are to David abnormal sentiments since he thinks the world can change, and he dances as in he takes action? But that's unlikely, because what I find more plausible is that Xander's phrase is whatever this thing is. This is clearly code of some kind, and it wasn't in the original LCI, but no one's actually solved this one. There's a bunch of numbers, then an ampersand, then a bunch more numbers, then an equal sign with footnote 14, then a bunch of question marks. Footnote 14 reads hint word length of 256. It's hard to say what this is talking about really. Our first real idea as a community was proposed by Fushiiri, of it possibly referring to the to be or not to be soliloquy, since there is one source in the internet which, when pasted into Google Docs and word counted, has 256 words. And I specify all that because other sources have different word counts, and even the same sources can give different results in other word counters. However, there is actually something perhaps more likely, because as found by Anderson again, the lyric World of Abnormal Sentiment Dances actually comes from another song by LCI's producer, Shabberwocky Shabberwocka, which in Romashi has 256 words and also 257 according to the wiki, but it's close. This is quite likely what footnote 14 is talking about then. If you want to know what the song is about, well, drugs, apparently, so likely unrelated. So then, have fun figuring this one out. Again, no one solved it yet, but we have tried. Here are some of the things I tried on screen. I don't want to talk about it all. Anyways, one thing you may have noticed is that I talk about the end. That's talking about the scene right after, where you're supposed to find an end, which, spoilers, is there. What's interesting is that even though the original LCI does the exact same joke, the symbol you're meant to find is in a completely different place. So maybe the end thing is related to the code? Other things which could be related are the modified alphabet from earlier and the most important thing puzzle. The latter in particular, seeing as Xander has been referred to as something important and Xander is related to this scene via numerals, so... Anyways, after that a quote flashes on screen, called the noblest to the audience. This is from our favorite book, Hamlet, and it's talking about how the noblemen should all be called to hear the story of Hamlet so no further confusion arises. Something like that. I believe the connection is that David's death, as in the destruction of his career, had a huge audience since the Killing Game is televised. When we call the noblest to the audience here, we're saying come look at this idiot socially self-destruct. Sure, why not? Then there's a countdown and the song winds down. You might be wondering about the lyrics in this section, and I am too! The original LCI does seemingly say something, but what it is unclear. The wiki has the end saying rise up people, it's the day to say goodbye to the fools, but that's not what's being said though. That phrase is from another song in the Literature Girl Insane album, Propaganda, so I don't know why that's there. However, good news! The Yoppei cover actually doesn't say anything coherent, the guy's just humming. Seems Yoppei couldn't figure it out either, so we don't have to worry too much about it. Finally, this thing flashes on screen, followed by footnote 22 and the end card. The thing is Morse code and it translates to "You still believed in me despite everything I've done, but that's just fantasy, isn't it? I simply chose to believe that you did. After all, I'm incapable of being someone without you." Okay, so you think this is about Xander, right? Because like he's the most important person in this MV aside from David, but what does that mean in this context? Did Xander not believe in David? Did Xander ever find out about everything David did? Presumably not during the killing game, right? So this will have to be talking from before, the time these characters don't have their memories of. But even still, the way David talks about it, it sounds like he's saying Xander didn't actually believe in him. And will that really be the case? I'm not sure. The other option is Mai, I guess. This is where that one "if you speak nonsense and I am a fool" interpretation of the Hitler line comes in again. Yeah, remember the one I told you to keep in mind like 2 hours ago? Perhaps Mai learned of everything David did and pretended to forgive him, and David believed she had forgiven him, but she really hadn't. Something like that? I don't fucking know. You could try to connect footnote 22 to Mai, I guess. It reads "the rest is silence", and Mai's profile states shit is like silence, so through word association, you know. But I'm doubtful because that's just a quote from a book, and hey, can you guess what book it's from? Did you say Hamlet? Guess it's Hamlet. Yeah, it's the last thing Hamlet says before dying, so it could just be David closing the video off poetically. I frankly don't think the footnote means much more than that. I don't know, I feel like this is something we need further context for to come to a definitive conclusion about, sorry. Is it done? Is it over? Is it finally over? Oh my god, it's done, I actually did it. I can stop looking at this fucking thing finally. I don't even want to do a proper outro, the video's already ungodly long as it is. Thanks to everyone who believed in me, to the Tumblr DRDT community, and to everyone who ever made a theory that ended up here, to Azarax, Venus Thinking, Anderson, Finest Cigar, Weighted Blanket, X Microphonics, fucking all of you. Thanks to Ocean and Now and Wavy News for getting into DRDT. Thanks to the dev for making DRDT. That's all folks, I am satisfied, so now I'll disappear. Goodbye!